Welcome to Lessons in Mastery. This is Tony Robbins. For 20 years of my life, I've been obsessed with the question of what makes the difference in the quality of people's lives. How come people turn out so differently, even people with similar backgrounds? What gives someone the competitive edge? What makes somebody fulfilled? Why is it some people rise above all the challenges and become so much more? Now, those questions started for me 20 years ago because I was trying to figure out my own life. Like, what do I do? How do I turn what I have as a desire into a reality? And I was very frustrated early on trying to accomplish things, and I failed to achieve them, and I felt bad. And so I began to rationalize for a short time. I started thinking, well, maybe people who succeed on a larger scale, they do that because they have so many more resources than I have. They had a better background, more education, they had a mentor, or they had money, or they had somebody that just really cared about them in their corner. They had a perfect childhood. And you and I both know that's totally absurd. That people that are given everything don't always turn out so well. Sometimes people are given all the money, all the background, all the education, a perfect childhood, total love and support. Sometimes they're not challenged enough. They don't become anything. They never develop any emotional muscle. They never discover who they really are inside. And yet then we see people who have been given nothing virtually. If anything, they've been given pain. And we watch these people become the kind of human beings you and I personally would think of when we think of what is an extraordinary human being. The kind of people that inspire us as people, the kind of people who everyone in the world knows their name. What would you think of the future of a baby girl born to a 13-year-old mother with no father and no visible support? Well, it certainly wouldn't be what we'd call a bright future. Most people wouldn't predict something great. What if I told you that little girl would be abused physically and sexually several times before she was even 13 years old? And then what if I told you at 13 this little girl became pregnant herself and gave birth to a stillborn child? What would you predict would be her future? What if by 14 she was so frustrated inside she was being sent to juvenile hall for the kind of behavior she was indulging in? What would the future be? But most of you probably wouldn't predict a very bright future. You probably wouldn't think of this person as having a future that you well know. You wouldn't think of this person as Oprah Winfrey. That's exactly who she is. You see, it's not what happens. It's what you and I do with what happens that shapes our lives. And so what we have to be able to do is say, how are we going to live our lives? What can we control? We can't control the environment. I mean, there's two worlds really, right? There's the outside world, all the things we're trying to control all the time, and we inside feel uncertain because we know we can't control all the events of our lives. But then there's the inside world, the area you have absolute control over, the area that if you direct it, if you become the shaper of your mind, of your emotions, what you believe, what you decide, what you do, there's where all the power is in life. So in the tapes that follow, I want to share with you what I consider to be profound knowledge. And profound knowledge is not because it's so earth-shattering, it's because it's so simple. See, I live for that. I'm always asking, how can you make this better? How can you help someone be happier, more fulfilled, stronger? How do you get someone to take action? What is that distinction, that idea, that tool, that strategy, that the minute you understand it, you can immediately change the quality of not only your own life, but anyone you have the privilege to touch? That's my definition of profound knowledge. Those simple tools that we use immediately to change your life. Because so many of us have ideas, but we don't convert them into reality. So for more than 2 decades, I've been in pursuit of that unique human animal, that person called an achiever. Those who've not only succeeded, but are fulfilled. Those who've not only contributed to themselves, but to their family and to society. So whether it be a parent or the President of the United States, whether it be a Michael Jordan or a Nelson Mandela or a Mother Teresa or the beloved Princess Di, who I had the privilege to work with before she passed on, all these people have shared with me things that help to create an extraordinary quality of life. And that's what this is really all about. So I want to challenge you right now, and I want to invite you that as you begin this program, do it with an active state of mind. Do it as if as you hear something, anything that's valuable, commit to yourself that right now you're going to use it. Grab the telephone and make a commitment to someone. Or pull out your time planner and write down what you're going to do. Or immediately go take action on any decision you've made or any change you've made. That's how you build momentum. So I invite you right now, join me on this never-ending journey towards a life of active mastery. A life where you not only succeed, but are fulfilled. Let the journey begin, and let's do it with passion. Who are you? Who are you really? Think about it. Your answer to that question is shaping your destiny. It's going to determine how you're going to respond to innumerable situations. Our beliefs definitely control our behavior. So the beliefs you have about one person, like a friend of yours, will determine how you interact with that person. The beliefs you have about a food will determine whether you eat that food. That's pretty basic. But the beliefs you have about people in general are global beliefs, and that'll affect all kinds of relationships. And the beliefs you have about yourself are the most potent beliefs of all. Not only the beliefs you have about what you're capable of, but the beliefs you have about who you are. Because you and I need to remember, it's not our capabilities that determine our behaviors. Our capabilities are constant. What we do is based on identity. I remember an interesting story that was told to me years ago that represents this idea of identity. It's the story of the frog and the scorpion. It seems one day a scorpion wanted to make his way across a river, and he saw a frog and thought, what a great way. So he called out to the frog. He said, Mr. Frog, he said, I'm a scorpion, and I need to get across to my family on the other side. He said, would you be willing to let me ride on your back across to the other side? It's the only way I can get across. The frog looked at him and said, well, I don't think so. He said, how come? The frog said, well, you're a scorpion. Scorpions sting frogs. Well, I'd get halfway across with you out there, and you'd sting me, and I'd die. And the scorpion looked at him and said, oh, Mr. Frog, he said, you're not thinking with your little frog brain. He said, if I stung you, he said, I'd kill you, but I'd drown too. He said, I wouldn't do that. I'd be killing myself. And the frog seemed a little confused by this and said, okay. He let the scorpion jump on his back. He started to swim across the river, and about halfway across, sure enough, the scorpion stings the frog. He can't even believe it. He looks at him, he's going down for the third time, and he turns to the scorpion, he says, I can't believe you did this. Why'd you do this? I'm dying, but you're going to die too. Why? And the scorpion said, because I'm a scorpion, and that's what scorpions do. They sting frogs. What does this story mean? It represents one of the most potent forces in the human personality, and that is this. One of our strongest needs within our personality is to make certain that our behavior is consistent with our identity, even if the identity we hold for ourselves is negative. What do I mean? Well, there's a very big difference between feeling stupid, doing something stupid, or knowing you are stupid. Now that may sound like semantics, but it makes a huge difference in how you live your life. We all feel stupid at times. We all do stupid things at times. But if you make the jump from feeling or doing something stupid in the moment to believing you are stupid, that belief about who you are will color every single behavior you're involved with for the rest of your life. It defines you and it limits you. You see, the beliefs we have about who we are, our identity, creates the boundaries within which we live our lives. And it isn't limited to something like whether or not we think we're smart or stupid. You say, well, I would never say I'm stupid. I'm smarter than that. Well, maybe you put it in the area of that I'm a procrastinator. See, it's different to have been a person who's procrastinated at times or to procrastinate in the moment than to know you're a procrastinator. Once you decide that's who you are, that behavior will be consistent. Just because you need to be consistent with your own identity. It works in every context you can imagine. It's different to know that you've got 10 extra pounds on your body. That's different than knowing you're a fat person or that you're a compulsive personality. You got to be very careful of the labels that you create for yourself or you allow others to give you, because they begin to define your experience. They begin to change what you notice about yourself, what you're willing to try, what you're not willing to try. They define the way you live. I can tell you, I've met with people over the years who tried everything to make a change and had been even successful in changing a behavior, like let's say stop smoking or stop using drugs or something, but it was usually short term and it didn't last. Why didn't it last for them previously? And now I worked with them and we got something that now 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, it still seems to be working. In fact, there's not even a struggle. They're not working not to smoke. They're not working not to take the drugs. Why? What do we do different this time? Well, in the past, they tried just to change their behavior, but they didn't change their identity. They didn't change their beliefs about who they were as a person. See, I can show you how to get off drugs and not use drugs. But if you believe you're a drug addict and then you don't use drugs for 6 months, I guarantee you it's going to be a struggle. Because you're fighting who you are the whole time. And eventually there's a good chance you'll go back. Or for the rest of your life, you'll have to go to sessions where you try to remind yourself that you can't use drugs. You know, there are plenty of people who've been addicted to drugs for years. Hard stuff. And then one day they've quit and never touched it again. How did they do that? Wouldn't it drive you crazy till you figured out someone made a change like that? A change from Saul to Paul, where one day what you loved you now hate, and what you once hated you now love. That's an identity change. That's powerful. That happens when you no longer see yourself as a drug addict. See, you can't be a drug addict and expect your behavior to be easy to change. It's much harder to change who you are in most people's perception than to change a behavior. See, that's the shift. You have to become the kind of person who would never even consider drugs in a million years. Think about it. Isn't there something in your life that you would never do? I mean, never. I know one for me is I would never murder another person. I mean, there's not even a question in my mind about that. So the thing to think about is this. If you would never murder someone, in your case also, why wouldn't you do it? So it's unthinkable. Why is it unthinkable? Well, because I would just never do that. Why would you never do that? Because it's not part of your identity. It's not part of your beliefs about who you are. See, your beliefs about who you are define what you will and will not do. See, it goes way beyond what you're capable of. Are you capable of murder? Some people say, well, maybe I'm capable, but I would never do it. There's a big difference between capability and how you live. And closing that gap requires an understanding of identity, an understanding of how to stop pursuing the kind of person you want to be, and in the moment, suddenly being that person right now and from this day forward. By the way, you may be asking, well, Tony, why do people behave consistent with an identity that makes no sense? Because in our culture, consistency is constantly rewarded, and change is often met with pain. I don't just mean pain within yourself, I mean pain from society. Think about it. In our culture, what do we call someone who says one thing and later on they do something different? We call them inconsistent, a liar, somebody you can't trust, somebody who's wishy-washy. I mean, we could go on and on with the labels. Nobody wants those. We link pain to creating change, especially at the level of who you are. Hey, how come you didn't tell me you're that kind of person? Well, you might say, well, I've been changing. Oh, yeah, sure you have. But on the other side, what do we call somebody who stays consistent? Somebody says that they're a certain way and they behave that way over and over again. Sure enough, that person is trustworthy. That person is somebody who's honest. That's somebody you can count on. That person is stable. So what this does is it tends to lock us into whatever identity we used to have. And that becomes a big limitation. Either that limit or the limit that comes from being successful. See, when we become successful, oftentimes we become superstitious. We don't want to lose what we've got. After all, we work so hard to be in this position. Somebody comes by and says, hey, you could change that. You could make it better. They go, wait a second. You don't understand. This is what's made me successful, being this way. Well, there's a great phrase that I kind of paraphrase from Einstein, and that is that really, in essence, the level of thinking that's gotten us to where we are is not what's going to get us to where we want to go. See, to get to where we want to be, we got to take on a new level of thinking. We got to know that what we've done up until now has been great. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fantastic. But to get to the next level, we've got to look at life in a new way. And one of those new looks is we got to perceive ourselves in a different way. Not just our capability, but who we are right now. Not someday, today. That shift begins the minute you begin to consciously define yourself instead of letting the environment do it for you. Because think about it. How do most of us define ourselves? Where do we come up with our identity anyway? Well, it comes from a variety of environments, but maybe the best way to answer the question is ask a different one. How do you define the people around you? How do you know if they're a friend, if they're a good person or not? The way we define other people, the way we discover their identity is we watch them. We listen to them. We judge people's identity usually by their behavior. Isn't that true? I mean, think about it. Somebody treats you real harshly several times each time you're around them. Pretty soon you go, I know that person. That person's a jerk. You know what the challenge is? Once you decide that they're a jerk, and if that becomes a belief, or worse, if that becomes a conviction where you know they're a jerk, nothing's going to change your opinion about it. Then even if they're really a nice person later on, they were just having a horrible day. Maybe they were being a jerk that day, but that's not who they are. Once you've defined them that way, guess what? Nothing they can do can change it. So you've got to know that sometimes we do the same thing to ourselves. That's the danger. Sometimes we do something terrible, and we say, gosh, I'm a terrible person. Or we do something stupid, and we go, I'm a stupid person. Sometimes we get caught in a pattern of behavior that's undisciplined. But you know what? If we start saying, look, I'm an undisciplined person, now it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If now all of a sudden you start defining yourself as an undisciplined person, if that becomes your belief as to who you are, not that you're capable of being undisciplined, everyone's capable of that, not that you've been that way at times, but that's who you are, once you put that label upon yourself, now your future behavior and therefore the results of your life are going to be colored by it. So you got to be careful. I'll give you an example of how this has been used to manipulate people in a very negative way. During the Korean War, our American POWs collaborated with the enemy more times than any time in our history. Now, how come? Because the Chinese communists understood the power of identity. They understood that you can only get a person to do something by force so long. But if you can change their perceptions, if you can change their philosophy, if you can change the way they think, if you can change their belief about who they are, you can change their behavior permanently. And that was their goal. See, the American fighting man knew who he was. He had an identity. And he also knew if somebody tries to torture you, you know all you give them is name, rank, and serial number. And that's worked for gosh only knows how many years. But the Chinese communists used what they called the leniency policy. They decided that what they wanted to do was try a different approach. They would bring the POW in and sit him down and say, listen, you don't have to be afraid of us. You know, we're only your enemy because your government's attacking us. We're just caring people. We're just defending ourselves. Listen, we don't want to hurt you. Here, have a cigarette. And they'd sit and talk with the gentleman. And this American POW would be very suspicious. But after 4 or 5 or 6 hours of talking and having a nice conversation, he'd begin to get a little tired and a little exhausted, a little worn down. But these people were so cordial. They'd say, look, your government doesn't care about you. Don't you understand the kind of unrest that's happening in your nation right now? They said, we care about our people. They said, let me ask you a question. What's really not perfect about America? Are you going to try and tell us it's perfect? And the American POW would usually respond, well, of course, America's not perfect. That's all they needed. Their whole goal was to break into the shell of identity and get you to make some very small commitments and then enlarge them. What do I mean? Well, they'd say, well, how is America not perfect? The person will say, well, we have unemployment, I guess. We have some people out of work. They say, well, let me ask you a question. In communism, do we have people unemployed? POW say, well, I don't know. They said, no, we don't. Everyone is employed in the communist nation. They said, do me a favor, just write this down. Just to be fair, write down America's not perfect. The guy would say, wait a second, you want me to make a comment? I don't want to write that down. He said, well, is it true? You just said it. It's true, isn't it? And POW said, well, yeah. And he'd write down, well, America's not perfect. And they'd write down how America's not perfect. Write down that communism, we have people who are employed. And sure enough, out of exhaustion and out of compliance, without being forced to, the American POW would have a document now in front of him that later on he would even sign that would basically describe why democracy was terrible and communism was great. Now, he's got to be able to explain to himself why he did this. Remember, we judge who we are by our own behaviors. So sure enough, he looked at his behavior and said, I wasn't forced, I wasn't coerced. How come I put this down? Well, because it's true. Then if that wasn't bad enough, he would go back to his cell, and the other cellmates would look at him and say, what happened? You've been gone for 18 hours. You don't look like you're marked up. What's the deal? He said, well, they just asked me some questions. And sure enough, in a few minutes later, over the loudspeaker, the Chinese communists would read this essay signed by him. And they'd say, did you write that? And he would, say, yeah. And they'd say, well, how could you do that? Did they beat you? Did they torture you? What'd they do? And he said, well, nothing. Well, how could you do this? Well, the American POW would finally, at that moment, he'd have to be able to justify. So he'd say, well, because it's true. And at that moment, the Chinese communists accomplished what they wanted. His identity began to change. Because two things happened. He began to defend a whole other view. He began to believe that this was an accurate representation of his deepest feelings. He was simply judging a set of small actions that were orchestrated, directed without his awareness. But worse, now others saw him as a collaborator, and they would begin to isolate him, sometimes even physically break out and fight or beat him. Now who's the enemy? His fellow POWs. And as a result, he would collaborate secretly with the enemy on a larger scale again than any time in our history. This is the power of identity. We will behave consistent with our identity, even if our identity is negative. So we must be very careful about what we buy into. I mean, a classic example is with our children. The Pygmalion effect, I'm sure you've heard of it. What it is research study that's been done over the years where they take teachers and they tell them that a particular student is absolutely outstanding, that they're a gifted child, for example, and that they'll need to be challenged a lot, though, because otherwise they'll just slough off. You know what invariably happens? The child becomes the leader of the class. Or if it's a group of children that they bring to the teacher, those students begin to excel higher than almost anyone else in the class, all because of expectation. What do you think that would do to you to have somebody tell you you're gifted? If you didn't get that gift earlier, why don't you give that gift to yourself right now? We're all gifted. All that is a darn label. So many children do poorly on something because they have a different strategy, or because they don't understand something yet, or it hasn't been communicated in their style, and then we assume they're learning disabled. They live with that label. And you know what? That label doesn't just affect them in their ability to learn. It affects their self-image. It affects the way they look at their lives. And all of us have wounds in this area. I just cleaned mine up because I got sick of it, because I realized it's all garbage. That I get to determine who I am. The day I decided that was the day my life changed. And that's the day I want this to be for you. You know this already. You know it consciously. But you got to remember the power of a belief. You've got to tap into those beliefs that affect you most. And those are the beliefs you have about who you are today. Not who you're going to be. Who you are right now. So let me ask you that question again. Who are you? I mean, who are you really? There's so many ways you could define yourself. But how do you? Because the definition you have of yourself is creating the boundaries, again, that you're living your life within. See, what do you have a conviction about when you describe yourself? Who do you feel certain you are? Not what other people have said about you, not what people expect from you. In your gut, who are you? See, are you a leader or are you a follower? Are you a person who makes a difference or are you a victim? Are you someone who's constantly trying to figure out how to grow? Or are you somebody who is constantly looking for an excuse? Are you merely a collection of habit patterns? Or are you something deeper, something richer? Are you merely your past? Or are you who you're defining now? I would suggest to you that right now is a moment you could begin to ask this question and really begin to give the answer. Instead of saying, this is an esoteric tape, what the heck is he talking about here? Who am I? What is this stuff? I want some tools, Mr. Robbins. Maybe you could really stop for a second and really consider the answer. Who are you? See, when I ask the question of people, I usually get one of three responses. Either a blank stare, which somebody goes into trance, or I get the Popeye response. I am what I am, But there are a few people who actually stop and they think about, who am I? How want I define myself? Because see, we all want to be able to define ourselves. We want to show how we're different, how we're unique. Otherwise, you're no different than the person who's sitting next to you. How do you have a sense of identity? Identity is nothing but definition. And with identity come parameters. Parameters of who you are mentally, emotionally, physically. How do you describe who you are to yourself? And what I'm really asking you to do is to ask a question. Just like Gorbachev did, I'm asking you to have some glasnost with yourself. Be open with yourself to ask the question anew. Who are you really? The way you're defining yourself is controlling how you're responding to this tape. It'll control your relationships. It'll control your occupation. It controls the way you think, the way you feel, and what you do. Now, how can you define yourself? Let me help you out with this so it doesn't just go off into the distance here. And if you're driving, while you're asking this question, notice what's going on around you as well. Don't go into a deep trance on me here. So how can you define yourself? There's so many ways. Or again, that's what identity is. To give you a clear definition, it's how you define yourself to yourself. How do you know you're different than your brother or your sister or your neighbor? What makes you different? What makes you the person that you can discern as being unique? Those elements that you use to describe yourself with conviction are the ones I call identity. So for example, some people when they describe their identity describe themselves by their emotions. That's basically who they think they are. So a person will say, well, I'm a loving person. That's who I am. Or if I say, who are you? They might say, well, I'm a peaceful person or I'm an intense person. Some people don't use their emotions at all to describe their identity. Some people choose roles. Well, I'm just a mom. I say, what? Just a mom? A mom is so many things. What are you, crazy? Come on here. A mom has got to be everything. She's the best friend. She's the teacher. She's a student. She's fun. She's outrageous. She's a stimulator. She's an entertainer. I mean, she's everything. You can't just be a mom. You better expand your identity. But see, a lot of people go, well, I'm just a mom. I'm just a dad. Expand that view. But notice, how else do you define yourself? Start with how you already define yourself. Maybe you do it by your job. Some people say, well, I'm a doctor, or I'm a priest, or I'm a salesman, or I'm a lawyer. That's one of the challenges. See, they don't say, I practice law. They say, I am a lawyer. So they go home at night and they cross-examine their spouse and wonder why they got problems. We got to get beyond that process. You got to know that you're more than what you do. But again, just start with what you have. I keep jumping to the next step. I want to expand you, but let's figure out how you already see yourself. So you need to start with that so you're aware of where you are. What else could you use? Well, you could use your roles. You could use your identity as emotions. You could do your occupation. What would be another category? Oh, metaphors. Some people use things like, I'm king of the hill, or I'm at the bottom of the rock pile. Those metaphors really shape a lot of how you think and how you feel and what's possible for you. What else could you use? Well, some people describe themselves based upon the feedback they've had in their past. Something like, I'm worthless, or I'm special, or maybe by their spiritual beliefs. I'm Jewish. Or their looks. I'm beautiful, I'm ugly, I'm old. Or maybe with their accomplishments. I'm the 1960s Spring Valley High homecoming queen. Hello! Some people have lost track of who they really are. You're not your past. Some people define it by what they're not. Oftentimes I'll ask people, who are you? And they respond by saying, well, I'm not this, I'm not my father, I'm not my brother, I'm not like this person, I'm not like that. You know what? Part of how you define who you are that's different than other people's, what you're not, but don't make your whole identity based on what you're not, or otherwise you're pretty limited in what you are. Some people describe themselves based on their past, their failures, for example. Other people do it based upon their future. How are you defining yourself? Who are you? What's the essence of your life? I keep asking you this question because I want you to keep asking it of yourself. Keep refining the answer. And in a moment, I want you to pull over if you're in your car, or I want you to stop what you're doing, and I want you to stop this tape, and I want you to write who you are. Describe yourself to yourself so that once and for all you can get an idea of what's going on unconsciously. Because here's the thing I don't think I've made clear. The biggest challenge with identity is most of us are not conscious about what our beliefs are about who we are. See, that's their power to control us. They're unconscious. But if we get really conscious about our beliefs and we stare at them and take a real good look, we'll immediately start seeing what the limitations are in our beliefs. And we'll also see some of the benefits, because the truth of the matter is, you probably have a lot of great beliefs about who you are as well. So right now, I want you to stop this tape, no more conversation, take out your journal or a piece of paper and just write down the question that philosophers have asked for thousands of years. Who am I? And describe in detail who you are. And when you're done with that, take at least 5 minutes, minimum of 5, and then come back here and let's talk some more. Stop the tape now. Welcome back. Now, I assume I'm welcoming you back, right? You really did turn this tape off and you really did do the exercise, didn't you? If not, go do it. Because if you didn't do that, why didn't you? Because you're busy? You're too busy? You said, Tony, I'm really busy. I got a lot to do. I don't have time to think about my identity. Give me a break. And more scary than that, do you do this in a lot of areas of your life? Do you unconsciously identify yourself as a person who listens to things and then doesn't act upon them? I doubt it. Because I think if you're the kind of person who listens to this kind of tape, you obviously are committed to make your life better. So now that you know who you are, who do you really want to be? See, however you limited yourself in the past, or whatever, even if you think your identity is really strong, in order to achieve all that you want, who would you have to become? Think about it. Would you have to be more gregarious, more outrageous, more fun, more passionate, more disciplined? Whatever you have to be, you need to become it now, not someday. You don't need to make it a goal. You need to fuse with that identity. You need to start thinking, if I was this person, how would I breathe? How would I walk? How would I talk? How would I treat people? What would I do when I woke up in the morning? How would I speak to myself? How would I think about life? And then you need to think about this and literally fuse with it. Imagine stepping into the body of this person and becoming this person, and then immediately go out and act this way. I remember years ago, I used to tell people, listen, if you want to change your life, conduct your life as if you were a public figure. That's the thing about how public figures have to be, how they have to live, how they have to treat people, what they have to do. And I said, if you do that long enough, the quality of your life will literally transform. Well, you know what? I became that person. I became a public figure, and I wasn't one. But now I am. It's an amazing experience. And what's great about it is I don't have to behave any different than I have for years. The way you hear me now is the way I am. This is who I am. I don't have to fake it or act like it. This is who Tony Robbins is. So now when people see me in an airport, I don't have to be constantly monitoring myself and saying, well, am I being appropriate or am I going to be misinterpreted? I'm just being who I am. That identity is real for me. And you might want to take that advice again. You might want to think about how would you conduct your life if you were a public figure? How would you be if you were already living your dream? See, if you'll start behaving, thinking, feeling, and knowing you're the person you've been pursuing, I can promise you many of the goals that are way out there, you'll start to experience them as a reality right now, or whatever's necessary to make them real will show up. For example, if you believe that you are an intelligent person, it's because you had an idea called I'm an intelligent person. And at one point you didn't believe it. It was just an idea. It was like a tabletop with no legs. But then you took some tests successfully. People told you were intelligent. You noticed you could figure some challenges out. And each one of these became a leg underneath your tabletop. So now the table is solid. It'll stand there. It's a solid belief. You feel certain about it. Well, that's the same way you can help yourself to change your identity. Go out and do some of the things that a person like this would do. Now, don't limit yourself to this technique, because you can change your identity right now by making a decision. Now, for some people to decide, by the way, they need to go through a ritual. Throughout human history, people have used rituals to change their identity, not only within themselves, but the way other people see them. Because the way other people see you and the things they expect from you tend to influence your behavior if you're not clear yourself who you are. You got to be careful. You got to have such a conviction about who you are that nobody can sway you. You know who you are inside, regardless of whether you're getting the results you want or not in the short term. But if you want to make a difference, look at what would be a good ritual. Again, if you look at the African culture, for example, I remember years ago when I saw the movie Roots and seeing Kunta Kinte, who's a friend of mine, LeVar Burton, who played that role so powerfully. But Kunta Kinte was part of a village, and how did a boy know he was a man? There was a specific ritual, so in one day, he transformed. The boys in the village kept talking about, they knew the day was coming. They heard stories that on the day you become a man, somebody came and put a hood over your head, and they took you to this special place and took you through this ritual. And that's exactly what happened. And the rituals were varied. And one of them I will not describe, but I can only tell you it was somewhat painful, and it was a way for them to have physical evidence he was a man. He came back walking different, literally. And he was wearing a special outfit. And sure enough, when he came back, the whole village now, because he was wearing that outfit and had been through the ritual, knew he was now a man and began to treat him differently. Our environment reinforces or takes away from identity. That's why we've got to decide the identity we want within ourselves. Today, how do people know if they're a man or a woman? Well, I guess the ritual in our culture is drinking. In Judaism, how does a boy know he's a man? He has a bar mitzvah. The girls have their version of that process. So we've missed a lot of that in our culture. But we found ways to replace it. They're just not quite as clear. And maybe we found ways that are not real resourceful. Going and getting wasted on your 21st birthday may not be the most powerful way of being able to identify yourself as a person who's free to do what they choose. Maybe there's a better way. But regardless, think of what might be a nice ritual for you. Maybe it's something crazy. Maybe, for example, you have excess weight. You used to think of yourself as a fat person. As long as you believe you're a fat person, not just somebody who has excess weight, if that becomes your identity, that you're a fat person, sure enough, you're going to find it very difficult to change. In fact, you can do all the right things, but you'll return to that identity. You'll start overeating again or do whatever's necessary to get consistent with your belief for who you are. So maybe what you need to do is go through a ritual, one that's stronger than all the diets you've been on. Maybe you need to figure something out unique that'll really jar you. Like one day you burn all your clothes except one outfit. And then you go out and you buy all new clothes at a size that's reasonable for you to be able to reach. And you know you got to keep wearing that outfit till you get there. I'm only speaking partially with tongue-in-cheek. I mean, we need to get more outrageous in the way we approach things. The reason I've used the firewalk for years is because people tend to transform a lot of their beliefs about who they are. It's not the firewalk has any power. Anybody could walk on fire. You could do it tomorrow. And I tell people that when I first get to the firewalk. I said, you could do it right now. All that's stopping you is your limiting beliefs and having a little bit of strategy. But you know what happens? Intellectually, they know they're capable. Everybody knows they're capable. But it's when you do something, that's when you know you've changed. And what happens is they get on the other side of this fire and their brain says, my gosh, if I can get myself to do this and it's this easy, what else did I used to think was so difficult or impossible that now it's probably just as easy? It begins to change their picture of who they are. See, I know I've gone on and on in this tape. I'm getting across hopefully one singular potent message. And that is this. Your life is defined by your beliefs, your convictions of who you are. That is the essence of what's controlling you. And if you ever try to change a behavior and it didn't last, it's because you changed the behavior for the moment, but you didn't change the controlling force. Your perception of who you are, that is what's got to shift. And maybe for you it's subtle, and maybe for you it's huge. I don't know. But I can tell you this. The first step is what I said earlier. Become aware of the unconscious beliefs you have about who you are. And again, those beliefs are sometimes reflected in your behavior, sometimes not, so that's not the way to define it. Just sit down and answer the question, who am I? It's a question that philosophers have asked for thousands of years, and it's one you deserve to ask yourself, and give it enough time. Spend at least 10 minutes answering the question who you are. I know you're busy, okay, but take the time to ask the question, and don't just give the Popeye response, I am what I am. Stop and think. And give some meaningful answers at the first things that come out of your gut. And even if you don't like them, like, if you say something like, well, I'm inconsistent, or I'm a person that never follows through, write those things down. It's okay. The first step is to notice what you believe. And you know what? You probably have references to back up those beliefs. Remember, you can find references to back up the idea that anybody is a good person or anybody's a bad person. If you look for something, you'll find a reference to back it up. If you want to back up the idea that people are basically rotten and they'll rip you off, anybody has references to back it up if they want to. If you want to back up the idea that people are good people and they care, everyone's got references to back that up if they look deeply enough. So the fact that you believe something in the past does not mean it was true. Just find out first what you've been believing about yourself. Write it down. Then step 2, immediately begin to question those limiting beliefs. Say, is that who I am or is that how I used to act? That's a very important question. Just because I've acted that way a bunch of times in the past, am I my past or am I who I decide to be now? Could I change my entire life right now regardless of how I've been in the past? And because I behave that way, is that because that's who I am at the deepest level? Is that who I am at the core? Is that the essence of who I am? I doubt it. Who we are is spirit. We're more than our physical bodies. We're more than beliefs. We're more than values. Somewhere inside of you, there's a part of you that's everlasting. There's a part of you that's never ending. You need to check in with that. When you start feeling overwhelmed or you start feeling like, I can never accomplish this or I'm just not cut out for this, remember, you're cut out for whatever you decide to be cut out for. You have the capacity. You are bigger than any challenge you could ever meet in your life. Connect with a greater source. Remember the miracle that your life represents. See, if you just remember what's going on inside of you right now, just for you to be listening to me, all the processes, with a heart that beats constantly, pumping blood through 60,000 miles of blood vessels, that's what's inside of you. If you put them end to end, they'd wrap around the earth twice at the equator. Very thin, I might add, but it would still do it. The point of the matter is, this is the power that's inside of you. Who are you? You're a miracle. The fact that you're alive is a miracle. The fact that you're living in these times is a miracle. If you start realizing that you're a miracle, that you're a gift, if that becomes part of your definition of yourself without a big ego about it, then all of a sudden life has a different quality. The types of actions you take are different. The way you treat people is different. And the results that you generate in your life will be transformed. What is more important to you than the way you feel? What? Is there anything? You know, in my business seminars for years, I've asked people, I said, tell me anything you want in this world. And people always give me all kinds of different responses. And they'll say, well, if I had some food, I would feel better. Or if, I made more money, I would feel like I had more power or more control or more freedom or more security. Or if I was in a better relationship, I'd feel more love. But in reality, they don't really want the relationship then. They don't want the money. They don't even want the food. They just want to feel better. They want to change the way they feel. They want to change the emotional content of their life in that moment. And I think it's real important for us that we take a new look at emotions, that we see that some of the emotions that we consider sometimes to be negative, the emotions that we think are most painful, may in fact be our best friends. They may be giving us signals that we need to make changes. If we heed these signals, and if we utilize them, we can change the quality of our experience and our life immediately. So just remember, emotions are the ultimate power. They start wars. They cause us to get married. They cause us to get divorced, to create children. They can even make us ill or they can make us healthy. In essence, the history of your life, the history of this world is the history of emotion. Emotions are the core that call us to action and change our entire lives. So where do they come from? What's their real purpose? What are some of the most intense emotions that we experience day to day that shape our destiny and that most of us never really learn to master? And then how can we master them and how can we utilize those to increase the quality of our life? Those are, in essence, the questions I want us to answer together today. How do you deal with your emotions right now? I'm curious. Because I found that people deal with emotions in one of basically 4 patterns. Either one, they avoid them. They literally try to not feel. They try to not have to feel, let's say, the feeling of rejection. And there's a problem with that. What would you guess it is? Well, yeah, if you're always trying to avoid rejection, you're never going to succeed. Because anything in life that requires you to deal with other human beings on a massive scale, where you're taking a step forward and you're trying to create change, exposes you to a point where somebody may disagree with you. They may reject you. See, the ultimate fear of rejection keeps people out of relationships. They never get to have the feeling they do want, which is love, or intimacy, or a feeling of connectedness, because their fear of rejection keeps them out of it. So you can't ever avoid completely negative emotions. They're part of life, and they cause us to grow. Some people don't try to avoid the emotions. Instead, they go into the I'm going to endure it phase. Or worse, I'll endure it but deny it. Those people usually try and disassociate from their feelings. They try to say, well, it doesn't feel that bad. But meanwhile, they keep stoking the fire inside themselves by thinking about how horrible things are, or how someone has taken advantage of them, or how they do everything right but things still turn up wrong, and why does this always happen to them? In other words, they never change their internal conversation. They never change their internal focus or their physiology. They keep feeling like heck, but they try to pretend like it's not there, deny it or disassociate it. And inevitably, this erupts, because the more you don't listen to the messages of your emotions, the more intense they get. They keep hammering on the door louder and louder to try to get through to you. And all of a sudden, you feel worse and worse and worse. Or the third thing I see people do is they use it for competition. You got it bad, let me tell you how bad I feel. It's really going to make your life better. And I hear people do it all the time. Yeah, my work's so horrible, let me tell you how terrible things are. You think that's bad, I'll show you terrible. And sure enough, people get in a match to see how bad they can make each other feel about their own lives. You want to stay out of that place. Hopefully you go with a fourth way of dealing emotions, and that is to learn from them and utilize them. Now, where do they come from? Do they just attack us like a virus where all of a sudden we feel something? Or as we all know, they come from other people, right? For example, if you feel loving, it's because of what somebody else did. They came over and told you they loved you, or they hugged you, or they touched you a certain way, or they kissed you, and that's what made you feel love. Is that really true? The reality is, you feel loved because you choose at that moment to create those feelings within yourself. You allow yourself to have those sensations. You have some rules, some criteria that say, when X, Y, Z happens, then I get to feel loved. And then at that moment, when all those criteria are met, somebody hugs you, kisses you, says they love you, etc., you then in your own body create these sensations that you call love. You release those sensations. You put yourself in that physiology at that moment. Conversely, if you feel bad, if you feel angry, if you feel overwhelmed, depressed, frustrated, lonely, all of these emotions are also created by only one person, you. You create them by the way you use your physiology in your moment, by what you choose to focus on, or to be even more specific, by the meaning that you attach to any experience in life. See, what we feel is not based on our experience, but again, on our interpretation of our experience. It's the way we represent our experience that determines how we feel. And look again at that word represent. It means, if we spell it out, represent. In other words, something just happened. Now, after it happened, you take it in through your five senses and you make a representation, another presentation of what happened inside your head. The way you represent those events will determine how you feel. So again, in this case, this woman took the simple act of a man opening the door with a smile on his face and she represented it inside of her head as, he's trying to take advantage of me, he's trying to make me less than him, he's trying to dominate me in some way. We must be very careful of the meanings we attach to things, because those meanings basically determine the quality of how we feel in our lives. We must make sure that the emotions we feel are appropriate, that in essence they empower us instead of disempowering us. There are no negative emotions. There are no bad emotions. Every emotion serves us as long as we interpret it in a way that adds a powerful meaning to our life. Something that moves us forward instead of backwards. And that's in essence what I want to do with you in this tape. So why do we have emotions in the first place? What's their purpose? Especially, why do we have these painful emotions? You might say, I know what these powerful positive emotions are for because I deserve ecstasy. Well, I agree with you. You deserve to feel great. And they're a reward system. And some people look at pain as if it were the punishment system. And sometimes it is. When we don't follow our own rules, when we don't live by our own values, by our own life standards, then we certainly give ourselves pain as a way to keep ourselves on track because we want to avoid pain. But I think negative emotions serve a very powerful positive purpose. Negative emotions are a signal that a change is needed. Let's think about this for a moment. When you feel an emotion like fear, an emotion that most people try to avoid at all costs because it's just too painful, or any variant of that emotion like worry or concern or terror, when you feel those emotions are giving you a signal. Rather than just try to avoid the feelings, you should listen for and notice the signal and utilize it. The signal of fear is, you must prepare. Boy, that's a valuable signal. It's in your body for a reason. It's saying to you that something may be coming in the near future that you better be prepared for. Either prepared to cope with or prepared to deal with. That's valuable information. We don't want to deny that emotion. We don't want to avoid it and pretend it's not there. That's how people get in trouble, emotionally, physically, financially, in their relationships. They don't want to feel the fear that the relationship's not working out, so they pretend it's still going great. Until one day they find themselves 5 feet from Niagara Falls in a boat with no oars and going, oh shoot, it's too late. They take an emotional fall, a relationship fall. Make sure that these emotions serve you. And the way to make them serve you, I think, is to realize that every emotion has a message for you. And what you want to do is not make it wrong, not avoid it, not freak out about it, not make yourself wrong for feeling it, but to do 6 things. Number 1, identify what the emotion is. 2, acknowledge and appreciate the message it's offering you. 3, get incredibly curious about what it's offering you. In other words, how could you use this to make your life better? Is this really what you want? And do you need to change the way you're looking at the world? Do you need to change the way you're acting? Do you need to change the way you're communicating? And then 4, get yourself to feel reassured by seeing that, hey, you've worked this out in the past. You've made it through this emotion before. 5, get yourself certain that you can handle anything like it in the future by rehearsing using this emotion as a tool of empowerment. And 6, take action and change your whole life. Those 6 tools that I just whipped through real fast are in essence what we're going to learn to utilize, not just in changing how we feel, but using how we feel, even those negative feelings, to make our life better. So what I'd like to do in this session, at least, just for the sake of our conversation and for our ability to deal with our emotions, is to take and create a model for each other. A model that I've created where basically I fit all emotions into 10 categories. Now the challenge with this is we all have different labels for what a feeling means. So yours may not agree with the ones I'm putting down, but just for our ability to have a conversation and for our ability to deal with our emotions, we're going to say there are 10 types of emotions, just for the sake of conversation. Is that okay with you? I hear a yes. I just hallucinate. That's another kind of emotion, I guess. But here are the 10 emotions, and I'd like you to jot them down. So if you don't have a paper and pencil, stop now and grab one. I'll wait for one moment. Moment's up. Welcome back. Here are the 10 categories of emotions. Here's the first one. Uncomfortable emotions. It's a pretty big category. You're right. But I'm basically describing here emotions that don't have a tremendous amount of intensity, but they do bug you, they bother you. Feelings of boredom, for example, or being impatient, or uneasy, or distressed, or maybe mildly embarrassed would probably fit under uncomfortable for most people. The second category of emotions would be the emotions of fear. Those could be things like concern, apprehension, worry, anxiety, feeling scared, or even terrified. These are all different types of emotions that we're going to relate, for sake of our conversation, to fear. The third category of emotion I call hurt. Any kind of feeling you would link to hurt. And we're going to talk about how most of our feelings of hurt come from a sense of loss. Fourth category, anger. And anger, again, has a large variety. Everything from mildly irritated, to angry, to livid, to resentful, to furious, to enraged. Anything in that category we're going to talk about as an anger emotion. Fifthly, emotions of frustration. These are any emotions you would link to being held back or hindered in your pursuit of something. 6, emotions of disappointment. Anything that makes you really sad or defeated as a result of something you expected that didn't work out well. 7, guilt emotions. Maybe another way of describing them would be the emotions of regret. Number 8, feelings of inadequacy. Any emotion you've ever experienced that you would consider causing you to feel like you're less than or unworthy would fit into this category we call inadequate. Number 9, feelings of being overloaded. Now again, overloaded I'm using to make it soft, but most of the emotions you should probably link in here would be feelings of being overwhelmed or even hopeless or depressed. Anything that makes you feel like there's more than you can possibly deal with would fit into the overloaded category of emotion. And lastly, number 10, lonely emotions. Anything that makes you feel alone, like you're lonely, like you're apart from or separate from, would fit into this category. So again, the 10 are 1, uncomfortable feelings, 2, any feelings of fear, 3, any feelings of hurt, 4, any feelings of anger, 5, any feelings of frustration, 6, any feelings you would link to disappointment, 7, the category of guilt and regret, 8, feelings of inadequacy, 9, feelings of overload, overwhelm, hopelessness, or depression, and 10, any feelings you link to loneliness. All of these emotions, these categories of emotions, are there for a reason, and they're to give us a message that something needs to change. Now, one of two things has got to be changed when we're feeling any of these emotions. And before I tell you this, let's make sure you're enrolled here. How would you feel in your life if you knew, no matter what emotion you felt, you could go, okay, am I feeling uncomfortable, or is that a feeling of fear, or is that a hurt feeling, or an anger type of feeling, or a frustrated type of feeling, or a disappointed, or a guilty, or inadequate, or overloaded, or lonely feeling? How would you feel if you knew that in a moment or two, you could instantly get out of that feeling, no matter how intense it had been? Would that be useful? Then stick with me, okay? Because I know this may seem a little bit cumbersome at first, so listen to me carefully. At any moment you feel any emotion, the first step you're going to always want to take to master your emotions, first step always will be to identify the signal. And what I mean by identify the signal is figure out, if you're having a feeling, which one of these categories does it go into. So let's take a look at how this might work. Let's say something happens between you and a loved one, and as a result you feel rejected. You look at your list of 10 here and you say, rejected's not on here, Tony. Well, step number 1 is identify which category it most fits. Well, when you feel rejected, you really could feel a lot of things about that rejection. You might feel uncomfortable, you might feel actually hurt, or you might feel angry about it, or as a result of rejection, you might feel lonely. What I'm trying to do is get down to the core emotion that really is controlling you, rather than just this giant word called rejection, which really isn't the essence of what you're feeling. As you go down and you look through your list, and by the way, I know you're not good at this list yet because it's brand new, but you'll memorize it simply by listening to this tape over and over again. By the end of this conversation, hopefully you'll know the 10, and I'll keep saying them again for repetition's sake. What we're going to call them from now on is action signals, because that's exactly what they do. They are signals for you to take action, to reevaluate the way you're perceiving something, or the way you're proceeding, the way you're communicating your feelings to other people, or the way you're behaving around other people or situations. In other words, they're going to tell us we got to make a change in order to get what we really want. And that's what these action signals are all about. They're not negative, they're not bad, they're there to serve us. But for now, let's come back to the example. We said step number 1 then always is identify the signal. That simply means where does it fit in here? So in this example, we've said that rejection really was just uncomfortable for you. Maybe what happened is you turned to kiss your husband or wife and they were busy reading or writing or something and they didn't really reciprocate. You felt, kind of uncomfortable about that. You didn't feel lonely. You didn't feel hurt. You didn't feel angry. You just felt a little uncomfortable. The signal of being uncomfortable is calling to your attention a message. And the message of uncomfortable feelings is, 1, realize you need to change your state. That right now, no matter what happens in the state you're in, you're not going to appreciate it. You're not going to be resourceful in understanding what things really mean. Say, for example, you're feeling in a state of being uncomfortable about that, you're going to start hallucinating. Well, gosh, my husband or wife, they weren't really loving to me. Does that mean that they're not interested in me anymore? Does that mean that, that our relationship's not as strong? We tend to hallucinate when we get in an unresourceful state. So when you feel uncomfortable, first message from that signal is, hey, change your state. Second, clarify what you want. Immediately, you got to clarify what you want. That's what this signal is trying to tell you. It says, don't just be uncomfortable. What do you want? If you want your husband or wife to be closer to you, get clear that's what you want. And step 3, immediately take action in that direction. And the way to take action in that direction is communicate your desire or do something that expresses it. Make sure you do something until you achieve what you want and you're no longer uncomfortable. It's literally that simple. Don't just sit around and go, gosh, I feel bored. I feel foolish. I feel insecure. I feel kind of rejected. I feel uncomfortable. Say, great. I need to change my state. The fact that I'm uncomfortable is a signal. It's giving me a message to immediately change my state. 2, clarify what I want. And 3, take action in that direction. If you do that, you've conquered this emotion immediately. Let's say you felt rejected to the point where you called it hurt. You really felt hurt inside. Well, what's the message of hurt? When you feel the sensations you call hurt feelings, that signal is giving you a different message. And the message there is that there's an expectation you have that's not been met, and you have a sense of loss. That's why it's more intense than just being uncomfortable. You feel like you've actually lost something. Now, the challenge with this, as with all these emotions, is that when you identify the message, you must immediately clarify what has to be changed. Whenever you have what you used to call a negative emotion, you're now going to call an action signal. You know that action signal is signaling you need to change one of 2 things. Either your perception or your procedure. Now let me clarify what I mean by that. Your perception might be, for example, that, gosh, you feel hurt. You feel like your husband doesn't love you so much anymore, or your wife doesn't love you so much anymore because, gosh, when you first met, boy, all you had to do was, look at them and they dropped their newspaper and came over and hugged you. Now they don't. You have a sense of loss and that hurts you inside. And that hurt is a lot more painful than the feelings of just being uncomfortable. The point, though, is this. Is this an appropriate emotion for you to feel based on this situation and this time with this person? And that's really the question we want to ask ourselves whenever we have an emotion. We know that when we have that signal, we need to first identify it, and then secondly, immediately appreciate this signal is offering us a message, and the message is we need to change. Again, our perception or our procedure. So our perception might be, person doesn't love me. Do we need to change our perception? Do we have some rules that are inappropriate in this situation? And the answer here probably is yes. Wouldn't you agree? This person is just wrapped up in what they're doing because they're just immersed. It doesn't mean they love you any less. What this emotion is telling you is you need to change your perception because otherwise you're going to feel pain for no reason. You might also look at this same situation as a symbol that you need to change your procedure. Procedure means the way you're proceeding with this information. In other words, what this may be is a signal to you that you really aren't communicating your real needs to your husband or to your wife. Maybe what you need to do is change your procedure, and instead of feeling hurt or instead of feeling uncomfortable, turn to your husband or wife and say, honey, I know you're wrapped up in your work. I know you're totally immersed. I know you're trying to do stuff that supports the whole family here. But you know what? I just need, 3 minutes with just you and I, because I really need right now to just feel loved by you. I need to hold you. I need to feel connected to you. Now, if that person starts to get upset, obviously you're getting feedback that your procedure still didn't work. You have to be a little more flexible, a little more creative, or maybe a little bit more loving in the way you do it. Or maybe change the timing in which you go about something. But that's changing procedure, changing the way you communicate. Or another way of changing procedure might be it's a signal that says that the way you're communicating to your husband or wife doesn't make them want to make you feel loved right now. That your present behavior may be turning them off. For example, let's say you feel rejected by them because when you come in the door, they don't rush up and give you a hug. They're immersed in something. Now, how do you respond to that? Well, what a lot of people do when they feel rejected is they feel uncomfortable with it, or they feel hurt, or some people get angry when they feel rejected. Now, what's the message of anger? The message of anger is you have a standard for your life, something that's important to you, and it's not being met by another person, or maybe even not being met by you. Sometimes we get angry because we're not living our own standards, huh? So let's say as a result, one of your standards is that people who love you, they run up and they greet you in your home. They don't do that today. When you feel angry, one of your standards has been violated. Something you believe important is not happening, and now you're angry about it. How do you respond now to your spouse who doesn't even know what's going on? Maybe you give them a dirty look, or maybe you make some snide remark, or you find something wrong with what they're doing. As a result, this person may very well purposely reject you. Now when you're feeling this rejection, you're feeling this hurt or this anger, and you say, okay, this anger means I have a message here, a signal. Signals I need to change either my perception or my procedure. Maybe you don't need to change your perception. Maybe they really are rejecting you deliberately. Maybe the procedure is not only how you communicate, but how you're behaving. Maybe you need to look and say, I'm not treating this person in a very loving way. No wonder they're giving me this feedback. I need to change me. Are you following me so far? So we're always getting the message. We're identifying the signal. We're appreciating the message and knowing the message is telling us we either need to change our perception or our procedure. The way we're communicating, the way we're behaving. I know this may sound complex at first, but I'd play this tape back and listen to this little section a couple of times. You'll get this down. I want to change either my perception or my procedure, the way I'm communicating to this person or the way I'm behaving, or just the way I'm looking at the whole darn thing, and making it so I don't have pain. I need to look at things, communicate, or behave in a new way. That's the message of pain. Let me say that again because I think you'll get this one. If you're feeling pain, it's a message. You need to change the way you're looking at things, and therefore what they mean to you, or change the way you're communicating your desires or needs to someone, especially if the pain involves somebody else, or change the way you're behaving, the way you're treating others, and that'll get you a new response. That's in essence the basis of all these action messages. They're telling you got to set a new outcome and move in a new direction. Otherwise, you're going to stay in pain. And by the way, let me mention something to you. If you ignore a message, if you ignore one of these signals and these action signals, whether it be the signal of feeling hurt or fearful or angry or frustrated or disappointed or overloaded, that signal doesn't go away. It intensifies. You'll feel even more hurt, even more angry. It intensifies until one day you get smart enough to say, hey, I got to change something here. I got to change my expectations, the way I'm evaluating this thing, the way I'm looking at things, the way I'm feeling about it, or the way I'm communicating what I need, or I got to change the way I'm behaving, period. I'm going to keep feeling this until I make one of those three changes. It's that simple. Next, once you've identified the signal, i.e. you've identified, you said, I was feeling rejected, and what that really means is I'm feeling uncomfortable, or it really means I'm feeling hurt, or angry, or lonely, or whatever. Then the second step is appreciate the message. Respect that emotion. Don't make your emotion wrong. So many times they say, well, I don't want to feel rejected, or I don't want to feel bad, or I don't feel angry, I don't want to feel hurt. Don't do that. Appreciate it. It has a message for you. It means you got to change. But it also means something very specific depending upon which emotion of these 10 categories. So before we go any further, let me review with you what the messages are that each one of these 10 signals is giving you. We've already said that if you're uncomfortable, the message is simple. You got to change your state, clarify what you want, and take action in the direction of what you want. And immediately you won't be uncomfortable anymore. If you're feeling category number 2, emotions of fear, whether it be concern or apprehension or worry or anxiety or scared or frightened or terrified, no matter what intensity it is, any one of those still are fearful emotions, and fear emotions deliver one message to us. We need to prepare ourselves to deal with something or to avoid the negative consequences of something that's coming up, something that's about to happen, a situation or event. Basically, fear is get prepared. Get yourself so you can deal with something. And that's a valuable message, isn't it? Now, the problem is what most of us do is we get fearful and we don't take the message. We either try to deny the fear and act like we're real strong, and all it does is get stronger and stronger. Or worse, we just surrender the fear and we don't get the message. All we do is we get caught up in the emotion and we get more and more scared and we amplify it. And we start thinking of the worst that can happen rather than figuring out, okay, what do I need to do to be prepared, to avoid the negative consequences and make this work? For example, people have fear of failure. That's a valuable fear. It's saying get prepared so you won't fail. For example, you might have a fear because the IRS is coming to visit you and you get a little note in the mail. You get this feeling of anxiety. That's probably a useful fear. Right? It's probably saying to you, hey, you better go get all your paperwork in order. If you didn't have that message, if it wasn't painful enough, you might slough it off. It might show up and it may cost you a lot of money. Not because you weren't accurate or honest, because you weren't prepared. Same thing happens if somebody asks you to give a speech and you get a little fear inside. Maybe it grows into anxiety. The more intense it gets, the more we tend to surrender to the emotion rather than get the message. That's why we may want to convert fear and say, well, I'm a little concerned. And what I'm concerned about is I need to prepare for this speech so I do the best possible job and I'll feel confident instead of fearful. Now, again, with each of these emotions, we want to hear the message and see if the message is appropriate. You may already be prepared. You may be as prepared as you can get. There's a limit to what you can do, right? There's a point where you have to have some faith. At that point, you might just have to say, you know what? This is a message I need to change my perceptions, not my procedures. I'm prepared by my procedures. I know what to do. I know how to do it. But I got to stop focusing on this thing being the worst possible situation. I just need to decide to become confident now, to focus on it working instead of it not working. The third category of emotions, those of hurt feelings, give us a signal and a message that says you have an expectation that's not been met and you have a feeling of loss. I.e., you expected somebody to keep their word and they didn't. That hurt your feelings. Or you expected someone never to share something that you told them privately and they told somebody else. And now you feel hurt. You feel a sense of loss of intimacy with them or loss of trust. And that sense of loss is what creates that feeling of hurt inside of us. What do we need to do? It tells us immediately that we have to evaluate, is there really a loss here? Again, do we need to change our perception? Maybe you just didn't communicate to this person that when you told them this, you wanted them to keep this information private. Maybe you haven't lost anything. Maybe you just have to change your way of communicating your needs, or again, change your behavior. The next category is anger. That's the fourth category. And again, emotions like irritation or feeling livid or furious or enraged or resentful, all of these fit into this category. Any of these emotions are simply signals giving you a message, and the message here is that an important rule that you have in your life has been violated by someone else or maybe even by you. See, when we think something's really important and somebody violates that rule, we get upset about it. How we deal with that upset will determine a great deal how much pain or pleasure we really experience in our lives and how close we get to other people or how much we push them away from us. In other words, if somebody violates your standards, that's the message. What you're supposed to do with that message is real simple. Communicate that you have a standard. Communicate that you know it's only your rule. It isn't necessarily their rule, but you need their help. So if we use the earlier example where you shared something in confidence with someone, but you didn't tell them it was in confidence, you expected them to know that, and you didn't just feel hurt, you felt angry about it, then the bottom line is, instead of beating that person up, you need to go to that person and communicate in a different way, right? Change the way you're communicating, change your procedure, and say, I know you didn't understand this to be private, but this is really important to me, and you need to deal with it as quickly as possible. Anger is usually an outgrowth of hurt. In other words, when you're hurt, you have a feeling of loss. Something you expected didn't work out. When you're angry, it's because it's something you think is really important that wasn't handled, or you've got a lot of hurts that have built up and you've not expressed them, you've not communicated them. So anger is usually a signal that something you believe is really important has been violated by someone or yourself, or that you've had a lot of hurts that you've not expressed that have built up until the anger. How do you deal with it? Change your perception. Maybe this person wasn't trying to hurt you at all. Change your procedure. Communicate better what your real needs are, or change your behavior. Tell people up front, hey, this is private. Promise me you won't share this with anybody because it's real important to me. Either way, you'll get out of your anger quickly. It's simply a signal that says you need to clarify with the people what your rules are and get them to agree to meet them, or you need to compromise them possibly. Some things you get angry about, you're going to get angry about for the rest of your life. And you better identify those things and realize that those are just your standards. They're not everybody's standards. And if you go around being upset because everyone doesn't live by your rules, you're going to be upset your whole life. So again, maybe you need to change your perceptions, change your rules, so that life is a lot simpler and a lot less painful for you. The fifth category of emotions, frustration. These action signals are telling you you need to change your approach to achieving your goal. Whatever you're going after, you're not going to get it the way you're doing it right now. That's why you're frustrated. You keep trying to get the same result by doing the same thing over and over again. There was a definition given a long time ago about insanity. It said insanity is attempting to get a new result by doing the same thing over and over again. It'll never work. So you've got to change your approach. When you feel frustrated, just know, hey, that's a message. I got to change my approach. I need to be more flexible in this situation. Category number 6, disappointment. If you start to feel disappointed, that's a signal. And that signal is bringing you a message. And the message is that you need to realize an expectation you had, an outcome you're going after, is not going to probably happen unless you change your expectation and make it more appropriate for the situation at hand. In other words, maybe you wanted something to happen in too short a period of time. Realize disappointment says you need to change your expectations. You need to change simply your view of things and come up with a more appropriate outcome for the time that you have involved, the people you have involved, the situation you have involved. So that's the message. Listen to it. Utilize it. Don't keep re-experiencing disappointment and stacking it until you feel overloaded, overwhelmed, or hopeless, or inadequate, which are emotions we'll talk about later. But first, let's talk about the next one. The 7th major category of emotions are guilt or regret emotions. Hey, when you've got feelings of guilt or regret, a lot of people say, well, don't feel guilty about anything. Garbage. Guilt serves you if you hear the message. And the message of guilt is really simple. It says you violated one of your own standards, and you must do something immediately to ensure that you're not going to violate again in the future. That's why you have the pain of guilt. Now, what most people do is they do one or the other. They either deny the guilt, take themselves out of it, and don't feel guilty at all, which, I agree you shouldn't stay in guilt, but if you just deny the guilt and don't get the message, the guilt's going to come back. It'll get you sooner or later. It's back there. It's deep. It's dark. It'll get you. So with that fear, maybe you should turn that fear into getting the message instead of being overwhelmed and again surrendering to guilt. That's the other extreme. People just walk around and they allow themselves then to feel inferior for the rest of their life. They feel so regretful about what they once did. That is not the purpose of guilt. It's to make sure you clean up your act. It's to make sure that you don't violate this again. It's that you make things right when you screw up. That's what you got to do. Now, sometimes you can't. Sometimes someone has passed away or something's occurred where you feel guilty about something that happened in the past you really can't change. The only thing you can change is your present and future behaviors. When you do that, you can let go of the guilt. But that's the message it offers you. And again, when you immediately feel the signal, what do? You identify the signal and you realize, hey, I'm feeling regret or I'm feeling guilt. Secondly, you appreciate the message. It's a message that says you need to change something. Either your perception or your procedures. Maybe you're feeling guilty about something you shouldn't feel guilty about at all. Have you ever done that? I know I have. I felt guilty one time because I didn't help somebody feel happy enough. I used to run around. If everybody around me wasn't happy, I felt guilty if I felt good. How stupid. We don't want to fall into that category. You might want to change your rules or your perceptions. Or you might need to change your procedures again. Maybe the procedure is you feel guilty about the way you communicated to somebody. You were too harsh. Go back and clean it up. Say, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do this. I really regret what I said. I was wrong. Boy, the guilt will disappear. Or change your behavior in the future. Change the way you're going to communicate to that person or people like them. Any one of these 3 changes, again, will immediately eliminate the guilt, and then guilt has served a good purpose, hasn't it? It's kept you on track. It's moved you forward. It's made you a better person. That's why it's there. Utilize it. Don't wallow in it. Let's go to category number 8, inadequacy. Boy, if you feel inadequate, those are any of those emotions, again, that make you feel like you're less than. Feelings of being unworthy, for example, would be inadequate feelings. Whenever you feel this emotion or emotion like it, get excited. Appreciate it's offering you a message, and the message it's offering you is simple. It's saying you need to do something to get better in this category right away. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect at it. Inadequacy just says you got to do something. Don't sit on your duff anymore. You're feeling inadequate because you haven't done anything to be really good in this area. Now, the first thing you got to do is, as you go through this process, is ask yourself, is this really an appropriate emotion? That is, am I really inadequate, or do I need to change the way I'm perceiving things? Maybe I got some rules that say, in order for me to be adequate, I have to go on the dance floor and outdo John Travolta. That's probably inappropriate perceptions. You need to change the perceptions, or it may be changing the procedures, which is, I need to prepare myself by doing something right now to get better. One thing you could do is just go practice. One thing you do is go out and initiate some communication. So inadequacy is a message to get up and do something to become better, or to change your criteria. to look at what you're doing and make it easier for yourself to feel adequate. You've probably got rules that are too harsh. Now, category number 9. This is one of the categories that I think immobilizes and destroys more people's lives than virtually any of the others combined. And that is a feeling of being overloaded or overwhelmed or hopeless or depressed. They all fit together. I use overloaded to make it sound simpler. Because if you say, gosh, I'm depressed, you'll immediately feel much more intensity than if you say I'm overloaded. The key here is to realize that this is a signal. When you feel hopeless, depressed, overwhelmed, or overloaded, the message that's offering you is that you need to reevaluate what's most important to you in this situation. Sit down right now and decide what is absolutely important, what's a necessity for you versus what's a desire. Write down all the things that are most important for you to accomplish. Then, 2, put them in order of priority. And then 3, take the first one on your list and do something about it. It's the same thing with depression, the same thing for being hopeless. Sit down and saying, okay, instead of saying it's hopeless, I need to change my state, number 1. That's always the message of all these emotions. Number 2, I got to clarify what's most important to me. Write it all out. 3, what's the order of the importance? And 4, what's the first thing on my list? Let me go handle that. The minute you go handle anything and you deal with one simple issue, your brain can handle it. And as soon as you handle that situation, you will feel like you're in control of your world. You will not feel overloaded. You will not feel overwhelmed. You will feel like there's hope, and you won't feel depressed. Your self-esteem grows when you do something to take control of events instead of having events take control of you. And all you have to do to take control of events is chunk them down. Pick one thing and master it. The message is simple. You're trying to do too much in too short a period of time. You're looking at the whole world and expecting everything to be perfect overnight, and you're feeling like you can't handle it all. Chunk it down. Here's the final category. Category 10. Feeling lonely. Have you ever felt really lonely? Gosh, I don't think there's anybody alive who hasn't. But what does it mean when you feel lonely? What is the message that you should get from that signal? I think the message is really simple. What we really need at that moment, the message is telling us we need a certain connection with people. The challenge with that message is a lot of times people take the word connection or the idea of the need for a connection with another human being and they make it into a sexual connection or instant intimacy. And then they feel frustrated because even when they have that, they still feel lonely. What we really need to do is identify what kind of connection. Maybe you do need an intimate connection. Maybe you just need some basic friendship or someone to listen to or somebody to laugh with or someone to talk to. It's real important when we feel lonely to just say, hey, this is really neat. What's great about being lonely is it says I really care about people. I love to be with people. And I need to find out in what way I want to be with somebody right now. And then take an action immediately to go in the direction we want. In other words, all 10 of these emotions are a message to our brain to say, hey, what you're doing right now isn't working, and you need to change it. You either change your perception, change what criteria you're using, your way of looking at things that makes you feel this way because your perception is not appropriate, or change the way you're communicating. You're not communicating things in a way where people know your needs, or just change your behavior. What you're doing isn't working. Change your approach. Every feeling you have, good or bad, is not based on the actual reality of life, but rather your interpretation as to what things mean. And remember, nothing in life has any meaning except the meaning you give it. So if you don't like the way you're feeling, change the meaning. If somebody passes away, you really cared about them and they die, you can feel really bad. You can feel disappointed. You can feel frustrated. You can feel angry. You can feel hurt. You can feel sad. And all those are appropriate emotions. But make sure you take a message from it. And the message you've got to eventually come out with is, what's an empowering way of looking at this? What else could this mean? Maybe it doesn't mean that I just lost somebody. Maybe it means this person has gone someplace they need to be. Or maybe this means my connection will be even stronger with them now than when they were here. Maybe this means I will value my own life and give more while I'm here because I realize that life is delicate. Choose meanings that empower you in life instead of assuming that meanings that disempower you. It's a final message to remember. If you and I are going to have the privilege of really enjoying true success, we must be able to define it. Most people have is through consistent action. Back then, 7 or 8 years ago. Well, I look at increase the quality of my life. They set in motion that day a force that began to change everything in my life. But I have a question for you. Do you think that if I would have lived continuously, that would have created the quality of life that I... Because the quality of life that I now enjoy is a never even dream. One way that I've been able to turn my dreams, and that is, what has changed my life was not a single action I took 7 or 8 years ago. Not even setting higher standards then, or even increasing the quality of my beliefs then. Only one thing has created a life that I now enjoy, and that is a capital C-N-I with an exclamation mark. day you know, and you huge little things. Notice them, and when you do them, unmatched in the people that you'll meet. Really happy. Isn't it somebody who's come from the fact that they're creating and expanding? More powerfully, they're improving the quality of people's lives around them. Powerful. The more you have to give. A cycle, a vicious pain cycle that most people live in. It becomes a pleasure cycle. Who you are, what you're becoming, and what you're contributing. This never-ending improvement has caused me what I now call profound knowledge, by definition, or distinctions that are simple and universally applicable, that the minute you understand, increase the quality of your life. My whole world was revolutionized a few that the car you and I know as the Plymouth Laser is exactly the same car as the Mitsubishi Eclipse. In other words, these cars are made by the exact same manufacturer. They are identical in every sense except one thing. They have a different name. And I guess the other one is they're offered by a different company. You want to know what's interesting, though? Chrysler sells an average of 14 of these per dealership. Their sales are in the ground. Mitsubishi is averaging 100 sales per dealership. Sales are skyrocketing. The same car, released at the same time, in any marathon he runs in. In 1939 that have been able to win 2 of these in a row. And what taught them a philosophy. Every single day when he did a practice. So what's the message? I've hammered it. People make in their lives is they hate repetition. Remember, repetition creates a certain level of power, but repetition with connive, with a commitment to constant, never-ending improvement. I believe that questions, asking the right questions and doing it consciously and effectively is like giving yourself the power of dynamite to change anything, a way to blow out obstacles and a way to actually push yourself to a whole nother level. Questions themselves have so much power to create more pleasure and success in your life or create more pain and more limitation and failure than virtually anything else out there. And when I look back on my life and where I've made the biggest changes, it's when I've learned to ask myself a brand new question. A question like, how can I do this better? How can I turn this around? How can I make this work? What's really most important in this experience for me to remember and to utilize? Those are the questions that have changed me because they've given me new answers. Everybody wants new answers, right? Don't you want new answers? How do you get them? Ask new questions. You want a better answer for your life? Ask a better quality question. So what I want to do is accomplish a couple things. One, I want to really get you to think about and experience and realize the power and impact of questions to change the way you feel, the way you think, the way you make decisions, to shape your entire life. Two, I want to sensitize you to the questions you're already asking yourself, questions you're probably not aware of, Because a lot of questions you ask yourself, you do unconsciously. You're not even aware of it. Whenever anything happens in your life, somebody all of a sudden shows up, something starts moving toward you, your brain starts asking questions. The first one always is, what does this mean? Is this going to mean pain or pleasure? And the second question is, what should I do to avoid pain and to gain pleasure? Those are the questions that are going on inside our head all the time, no matter what's occurring in our life. But I want us to become even more sensitive, so if we find ourselves asking habitual questions, that's going to mean we're going to start experiencing habitual results in our lives, and sometimes those habitual results are not the ones we want. See, if you're asking yourself questions all the time like, why can't I ever break through this? You're setting yourself up so that you can't. See, the brain is set up that whatever you ask for, you'll get. If you ask, why can't I do this? The brain will go, okay, here's why you can't do it. If you ask your brain, hey, how can I make this work? How can I turn this around? It will come up with answers. Remember, whatever you look for, you will find. Seek and you shall find. Ask and you shall what? Receive. See, this is a law. It's how your brain works. And mastering this ultimate tool changes your whole life. The third thing I want to do is get you to develop some new questions for yourself. Some questions that really empower you. Some questions that create new possibility, make you look at your world in a whole other way. Something that'll open up and cause your life to change. And finally, the fourth major result I want to come from this tape is I want you to get in your gut, not just in your intellect, a simple reality. And that is that your entire world can change at any moment in time just by asking a new question. You can literally change the way you think, the way you feel, your direction, the momentum of your life, your ultimate destiny by consistently asking new questions. My life changed when I realized that the only difference between me and the people around me who seemed to be doing better was they were asking better questions. See, my whole life changed one day when I realized that whatever I'm experiencing in life is not based on life itself, but what I'm focusing on. Focus equals reality. Whatever you focus on, that's what you get. Hey, right now in the news, you could feel really bad. How could you do that? Focus on all the horrible things in the news. It's not hard. Turn on your television set. You hear about all the murders. Did you know in this year the death toll from murder is higher than ever before? Isn't that exciting? And you can look at that and say, why are people so terrible? Why are people so destructive? And you could get yourself whipped into a frenzy about it. I'm not saying you should ignore it, but maybe a better question is, what's going on to cause this? What could we do to help change this? How can we utilize an understanding of human behavior to change this trend in our society? See, those questions will lead us to answers instead of just focusing on the problem itself. Whatever happens in life, whatever we feel is not based on the reality, but based on our focus. See, you could be really depressed right now, focus on all things that have ever been terrible in your life, or you could be really excited right now by thinking about all the great things that happen in your life, or all the things that could happen in the near future. Focus equals reality. And here's the key. If you want to change your reality, change your focus. If you want to change your focus, change the question you're asking yourself. That's the key to everything. Questions are the control tool to focus. Therefore, questions are the control to your own experience of life. If you change your consistent questions, you can change consistently how you feel, how you think, how you make decisions, and who you become. The only difference between you and other people is the questions that they ask. That's it. If you see someone who has more success, the first thing you should do is find out how do they think. See, thinking is nothing but the process of asking and answering questions. You're doing it constantly. That's all it is. Here's an example of a woman who asked herself disempowering questions. Here are questions she asked in a period of 20 minutes of herself in conversation with a friend of mine. And we just wrote them down as we listened to them. And I'll just give you a little background on this woman. She's quite unhappy. She is an artist and she was just divorced. Listen to some of the questions. First question, she looks at her artwork. She's given her heart and soul to it and she says, is this saleable? Next question, am I doing this with integrity or is it just another sale? Think what that would do to your self-esteem to be asking that about yourself. Then our next question is, well, what does it matter anyway? How would that be for demotivating your whole life? Next question, why can't I just retire? That's not exactly going to make you a great artist and make you want to share your work. Next one, how long do I have to wait for someone to rescue me? There's a situation where you're not going to be empowered in your life, totally in reaction. Next one, what should I tell my therapist about this? Next one she said is, should I tell my therapist about this? Next she said, do I have any experience doing this? By the way, this is a question I rarely ask myself. That's one of the reasons I'm empowered. Because if I kept saying, well, do I have any experience doing this? Most of the things I now do, I once didn't have any experience. I wouldn't even have tried it if I asked that question. Don't ask yourself, do I have any experience doing it? Ask yourself, who's already getting results so I can model? What could I do right now to emulate them? That's an empowering question by contrast. Next question she asked herself is, am I sabotaging myself? Remember, if you do that, you create doubt. You begin to wonder if you're sabotaging yourself. You look for reasons to back up that idea as you ask the question. Why can't I be married to a wealthy man? Why have I done this to myself? Has my entire life been nothing but a self-sabotage? Last one, why do I make myself so unhappy? Most people have a string of questions they use to destroy themselves. Don't let this be you. You got to start listening to what you say to yourself, not just what you say, but the questions you ask. They control it all. See, one day I was thinking to myself, what really makes the biggest difference in life? Who I've become, who I am as a person, where I'm going. What determines that? And my answer was, well, it's not the events that shape my life, it's the way I evaluate them. And I thought, well, evaluate is such a big word. It's true. How I evaluate, how I look at it, all those different things, that affects me. But really, if I want to take that word evaluation, since it's such a big word, and make it simpler, what is an evaluation? How could I explain evaluations in a simpler way so that people could really use it? So I thought to myself, all right, well, how would I explain it? What would I say? What is an evaluation? And I thought to myself, well, right now I'm evaluating, aren't I? I'm trying to evaluate how to describe what an evaluation is. What am I doing right now? And I noticed something. I thought, I've asked myself a bunch of questions here. I said, what is an evaluation? How can I describe it more simply? What am I doing right now? What are all those things? Those are questions, aren't they? I thought, is it possible that evaluations are nothing but questions? And I started laughing. I thought, well, isn't that a question? And I thought, and isn't that a question is also a question, isn't it? In fact, think about it yourself. Can you think of a situation where you're evaluating where you're really not asking a question? And notice I'm asking you a question in order to get you to evaluate. The point is this. Evaluations are nothing but questions. If we change our questions, we change our experience. We change who we are, how we think, and what we do. So if we want to control our life, we want to control our questions. And here is something I've already said in this tape. I want to say it again because I want you to hear me and I want you to remember this. If you don't remember anything else I say in this tape, please remember this. Whatever we ask for, we'll get an answer to. I repeat, whatever you ask of yourself, whatever you ask of your mind or the world, whatever you ask for consistently, you will get an answer, whether it's true or not. So remember the example I gave just as we started this tape. If you say, what's wrong in my life, there may not be anything wrong. But if you ask what's wrong, you'll get an answer. If you ask, how come I can never work things out, your brain will tell you because you're an idiot. See, the bottom line is if you ask, how can I make this work? How come my life is so great? Your brain will tell you because you're smart, because you've learned this, because you've applied what you know. See, we have to understand that if we seek, we'll find. If we ask, we'll receive. It's a critical distinction about questions. I know you know it, but you need to hear it enough by repetition that you remember it during those critical times when you start asking lousy questions. And secondly, remember what I've reiterated. The only difference in people is the difference in the questions they ask. Think of it. Who are the great leaders that you think of? Let's say, for example, in American history. One pops into my mind almost always is a gentleman named John F. Kennedy. Here is a man who could move us, who was charismatic, who cared about people, who was able to shape a vision and get people to follow and go for it. Able to show people they were responsible for creating their future, that it wasn't just government. In fact, of all the quotes, of all the speeches he gave, one of the most highly quoted is the one where he really got us to ask ourselves a new question. You remember it, don't you? He said, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Wow, what a new way of looking at things. He got us to ask a question where we're responsible, where we're in charge, where we're here to contribute, not to take. See, that's leadership, that's power, that's vision. Another great leader, let's take Martin Luther King. He was constantly asking the question, how do we create equality? How do we turn things around? And he gave answers, nonviolent answers on how to turn things around because he asked a different quality of question. He said, how do we do this in a way that's not destructive, in a way that builds? How do we turn the dream into reality? He asked the question. He didn't give up the question until he found real answers. That's power. That's leadership. That's an ability that you and I have. You're a Martin Luther King. You're a John F. Kennedy if you just ask a quality of question that's similar. Think about it. See, Einstein asked a different question. Do you know how he came across this theory of relativity? It didn't come about because he was just this great genius. He did something you could do. He was sitting in a calculus class and he was bored. Does that sound familiar? And what did he do? He looked at the clock. And as he looked at the clock, he asked himself a series of questions, 5 questions that really changed probably the history of physics, the history of how we look at our universe for many people. First question he said is, he wondered, just a weird, stupid question most people would have thought, how do we know what time it is? Good question. And his answer was, well, we see it on the clock. Then he asked a second question. And the question was, well, how do we see what's on the clock? His brain said, well, the light bounces off into our eyes, and that's how we see it. And then he let his brain really go nuts and ask a question most people don't ask. See, how you get new answers? You ask new questions. You want answers no one else has? Ask questions no one else is asking. His question was, well, what if? A great way to start a question. What if? That's called a possibility question. What if you could travel with the light to the clock? Like as fast as the light was going. What if you could travel the speed of light? You were like on the end of that beam of light. And he visualized that. He said, what if you're on the end of the beam of light as it went? What would you see then? And he thought, well, what you'd see is you'd actually see the actual hand go and move to that next minute. You'd actually see the time change. He thought, that's interesting. Then he asked the fourth question. What if you traveled faster than light itself? Then what would you see? You wouldn't see the clock go from 1 to 2 on the minutes. If you're going faster than light, I guess what you'd see is you'd see the clock actually moving backwards. Then he said, final question, would you just be seeing the clock go backwards, or would time itself actually be moving in reverse because you were going faster than light itself? Now, could you ask those questions and thought in a similar way? You bet you could have. The only difference is he had some references on how to be able to back up his theory with numbers and equations. That's the only difference. But the questions he asked, you could have asked as well, and you may have come up with similar answers. Isn't that fair to say? If you want to be great, ask great questions. The quality of your life is nothing but the quality of questions you ask yourself. If you ask questions like, why me? Why does this always happen to me? Then guess what? You're totally disempowered. If you ask questions like, how can I turn this around? How can I make it work? How can I utilize this? How can I use this to empower myself and others? You're going to have some phenomenal answers. And answers give you power, the power to change your world. Remember this too. Superior questions create a superior life. See, anybody who's superior in a particular area is superior because they ask questions in that area. If you know somebody who's funny, it's not because they're more funny than you are. It's because they ask a question consistently you probably don't ask, which is, what's funny about this? Or how could I make this sound funny? Or how can I make this look funny? See, if you keep asking that question, I got news for you. You'll get answers about how to make things funny. But if you have this belief inside your head that says, well, I'm a serious person, or I can't tell jokes, or I'm not very funny, or I can't do that, I can't make people laugh, that belief will keep you from ever even asking the question. Or if you ask the question, you'll do it in a state of mind where you don't expect an answer. And I will tell you, the state you ask a question in certainly affects your answers, right? If you ask a question like, well, how can I get rich tomorrow? It's highly unlikely your brain will go, well, here's 52 ways to turn it all around. But if you say, hey, how could I really make a difference? How could I add value and be profitable in the process? And you say it with a state of expectancy, your state will help you get real answers. If you ask a question expecting an answer, you'll get it. That's part of superior question asking. Put yourself in a state where you expect the answer, and if you don't get it, keep asking. The answer will come. See, I don't care if you're Einstein or if you're Disney, who's looking at an orchard and saying, how could I create something here that people from miles around the world will come to? The only way to take a vision and make it real is ask the question. But most people are afraid of asking questions, or most people have the habit of asking disempowering questions. You don't want to be part of that. When you ask questions, you accomplish 3 things. Number 1, the minute you ask a question, you immediately change your own focus, or if you're asking someone else a question, their focus. Now, what happens when you change somebody's focus? Let's say they're really all angry and upset about something, and you come by and out of the clear blue sky, you ask them a question like, hey, let me ask you a question. Where were you yesterday at 2 o'clock? Well, the first thing it does is it interrupts that person's focus. You can't think about 2 things at once. They can't think about what they're upset about and the question you're asking them. So it changes their focus, and they think about 2 o'clock yesterday, and they're a little confused, and that changes their state. It's going to change the way they think, the way they feel, maybe even their behavior a little bit. Or you could come along and say, hey, I have a question for you. I know that's upsetting and stuff. Let's talk about that in a second, but I want to know one thing. Tell me about your daughter. I heard you're pretty excited about what she's doing in school. If you get that person to tell you about their daughter, focus on their daughter by asking them a question, all of a sudden, if they're proud of their daughter, watch what happens. Their state changes. They start to feel good. And when they feel good, will that change the kind of questions they ask a few minutes later? You bet. When you're feeling better, you ask better questions. If you're feeling angry, you say, why did they do this to me? How come this always happens? If you're feeling pretty good, you go, how come I got so lucky? How can I use this? How can I turn it around? So questions, number 1, they change our focus and therefore our state. And all of us need the ability to change our state at any moment in time. I'll give you an example of how I use this for myself. When I first discovered the power of questions, and I started actually making this not just an idea, but really a technology, something I used on a regular basis with myself, I discovered some news one day, and I was very angry, very upset. Somebody had taken some of my stuff and stolen it, and they had put their own name on it, and I got real upset about this. And I was like, how could this person have the audacity to do this? Now, you can imagine that's not a question that probably makes you feel too terribly good, right? And I said, how could this person be such a liar, such a thief? How could they take advantage of me in this way? I was whipped into a nice frenzy. And I knew I could have changed my state by the traditional ways I've taught you. I could have changed my physiology. I could have changed my focus, but I didn't want to. But see, asking a question is easy to do, and you're doing it all the time anyway. So I asked a question. The question I thought to myself was, what could I learn from this? And I started thinking, well, what could I learn from this? My answer was, well, I could learn the power of questions and whether they really do work even when you're upset. So I asked the next question. I thought, okay, I was thinking about how disrespectful he was. And I thought to myself, okay, well, what do I respect about this guy? Which is the direct opposite of what I was feeling. I had no respect for somebody who cheats and connives and lies and steals. But I thought, what do I respect about this guy? And you know what the answer came up with? I asked the question really expecting the answer, and my brain first said, nothing. And I said, okay, well, what could I respect about him if I wanted to respect him? You know what my brain said? Well, at least he's using my stuff. At least he's out there trying to apply it. At least he isn't going in one ear and out the other one. I may respect the fact that in his mind, I'm sure he doesn't think he's stealing. In his mind, he's probably spreading the word. I don't know what he thinks he's doing, but, I respect the fact that he at least is listening and trying to do something with it. And somewhere in the back of his head, he's probably not trying to steal. Somewhere in the back of his head, what I respect is he probably believes he's helping other people as well. And maybe he is. Who knows? And what it did, at least made me a little neutral. Now, it didn't make me not want to take legal action, but it got me out of a negative state. See, the questions we ask change our state. If in a moment I want to feel good, all I got to do is ask myself the question, who do I love and who loves me? Wow, what a quick state change that is. In the midst of all the craziness, I can ask myself that. Who do I love and who loves me? Instantly, it'll change my state. What am I grateful for? What's great in my life? In the midst of anything, if I stop, and again, here's the key, I must really want to hear the answer. I got to discipline myself to say, I really want to know the answer to this. As soon as I think about it and focus on what's great, I feel great. See, I don't need a drug. I don't need cigarettes. I don't need food. I don't need alcohol, and neither do you. What I need is to control my mind, to direct it with questions. Here's the second thing that questions do. They instantly change what you're considering and what you delete from your life. I have a phrase that I've used before, and I call human beings deletion creatures. What does it mean? Well, simply what it means is that you and I have so many things going on around us right now that we can't possibly focus on them all. We can only focus on a small amount of things at one time. We can only consider a few things simultaneously. Our brain goes a little nuts consciously. Now, our unconscious mind can do all kinds of things, but consciously we're limited in that area. So what happens is the brain spends most of its time trying to figure out what not to pay attention to. For example, right now there might be noises going on in your car or in your home. You might feel the air conditioning going against your skin. There's blood pulsating through your ears. Your heart is beating 100,000 times a day without you thinking about it. All that stuff's going on, you delete most of it. You only pay attention to a small number of things. And those are the things your brain asks questions about. Questions, again, control your focus. So think about this. If you're feeling really sad, there's only one reason. It's because you're deleting all the reasons you could be feeling good. You're deleting all the great things in the world that feel bad. And by the way, if you're feeling good, it's because you're deleting all the bad things you could be focusing on. So when we ask somebody a question, we change what they're focusing on and we change what they're deleting. For example, if right now you're mad and I say to you, hey, listen, I know you're mad, but let me ask you one question. How are you going to use this? You were deleting how you could use this. You weren't focusing on that. The minute I change your focus, you start to consider a new possibility. I bring into your focus, I bring into your reality that this could be a benefit. I change what you've deleted. Here's the third thing that questions do. They give us access to new resources. They give us power, if you will. See, if you ask a question like, well, how come I can't do this? That access is the power to shut yourself down. If you ask yourself a question like, how can I make this work and have fun doing it? You not only get the answer of how to get the job done, which gives you resources, ideas, and thoughts you weren't thinking of. It gives you access to those ideas that are somewhere in the back of your head. It just gives you the answer. It's like pushing a button. Asking a question is like pushing a button, and you get a result. So when you say, how can I turn this around? You get an answer. If you say, how can I turn this around and enjoy the process? You get an even better answer. You get a fun answer. You get an enjoyable answer. So those are the three things that questions do. And here's the key. Questions create momentum. See, have you ever noticed when you start asking questions, let's say negative questions like, why'd they do this to me? Well, how come they always do that? Pretty soon you're asking worse and worse and worse questions. You kind of get on a roll. Same thing happens on the positive side. So questions can create momentum, and questions can be used to stop momentum if you ask a new kind of question. Now, let me offer you two giant categories of questions. Number one, empowering questions, and number two, disempowering questions. Now, I know that sounds third grade, but think about it. If you on a regular basis would just become sensitized to noticing the questions you're asking yourself and saying, hey, is this empowering me or disempowering you, that alone can change your life. I'll give you an example of the difference. My definition of an empowering question is one that provides new understanding. See, if you ask a question, it gives you more understanding, more distinctions, more ideas. You got an empowering question. Another definition might be an empowering question is one that focuses you on solutions instead of problems. See, if you're focusing on solutions, if you keep asking for solutions, you're going to get them. It's that simple. And a third way of defining empowering question for me is if a question moves you to action. If it's getting you to do something about something that's bothering you or do something about how to improve your life, now you're really expanding. Now it's really working. Fourthly, I think a question is empowering if it makes you responsible and gives you the power to make a change. That is, if it makes you not responsible in the negative sense, like, oh my gosh, you're at fault, but response-able. Able to respond to what's going on because you see that you're in control, that you can turn it around. Fifth key to an empowering question, I think, is if a question makes you have a deeper sense of meaning for your life. And the sixth distinction I put down here in my notes is I think a question empowers you if it helps you to learn anything from the situation or helps you to feel or help other people to feel empowered. Now, what's a disempowering question? Those are easy. They're pretty much the antithesis. You know, a question is disempowering if it focuses you on purely the problem and not the solution. It's a disempowering question if it makes the problem bigger than it really is. It's disempowering you if it makes you unresourceful, if it puts you in a stuck state where pretty soon you don't feel like you can turn anything around. It's a disempowering question if you feel like you're responsible but there's nothing you can do about it, if you feel like you're out of control. And finally, disempowering questions are questions that are like endless loop questions, like, why me, God? If you ask those questions, you can go on over and over and over and come up with a zillion answers and never know for sure what things really do mean. We want to ask empowering questions. And again, the difference in the quality of people's lives is whether they ask more empowering or disempowering questions. For example, a story I'll never forget. It's about a gentleman in Poland who's a writer today. And in World War II, being of Jewish descent, the Nazis stormed into his home and took his family, sent them to Auschwitz. He not only went through the horrors of the camp, but he went through the personal horror of seeing his own individual family members murdered, most of them gassed, one shot. You can imagine the intensity and the pain. He looked around and saw himself and saw everyone else, and it became clear to him from his mind, he believed that if he stayed there even another day, he would die. But unlike most of the people around him, he asked a different question. The question he asked was this: how do I get out of here today? And he asked the question with such intensity and such expectancy for an answer that every answer he got, when it didn't make any sense, he just said, how can I still do today? There must be a way. How can I get out of here today? How can I get out of here healthfully, alive, today? He asked it over and over and over again, and he kept getting answer after answer, and most of them didn't work. He just kept asking the question, kept getting new answers, until finally his brain had this embedded within it. 6 or 7 hours into the day, he got his answer. Because the question was so obsessive, it was there constantly. He looked up and he saw a huge pile of bodies that had been shoveled into the back of a truck. Men, women, and children who'd been gassed and murdered, and their corpses thrown on the back of the truck naked. The gold fillings had been pulled from their teeth, any jewelry that they once had, anything that they owned was stripped of them, including the clothing, so it wouldn't be wasted. Instead of saying, how could these Nazis be so abusive, so destructive? How could God make something so evil? Why has God done this to me? He asked a different question. He said, how could I use this? How could I use this to escape? And he instantly got the answer. In a heartbeat, without hesitating, he ripped off his clothes. He hid them, and he immediately dove into the pile of bodies while no one was looking, and pretended that he was dead, remaining totally still while his body became almost crushed by an additional pile of bodies that were poured on there. Cadavers, the smell of rotting flesh, and the rigidity of the remains of other beings surrounding him everywhere. He waited there and waited, hoping that no one would notice that he was there, hoping sooner or later the truck would drive off. And fortunately it did. It not only drove off, but when it dumped the bodies, it dumped them in a giant open grave, thank God. He remained there for hours until nightfall. And finally, when he felt certain there was no one there, he eventually crawled and extracted himself out from the cadavers. And he ran naked 45 miles to freedom. What was the difference between him and other people? He asked a better question. Think about it. I'm not saying that everyone there, if they would ask the question, would have escaped. My point, though, is if you want a unique experience, ask a unique question with total expectancy for answers. And if you don't get the right answer, keep asking it. Ask with consistency, ask with intensity. Another example is my good friend W. Mitchell, a gentleman who found himself in a motorcycle accident with 2/3 of his body burned off. Not only did he recover from that, but then he turned around and had an airplane accident, became paralyzed from the waist down for life. And yet one of the most incredible people I know, ran for Lieutenant Governor of Colorado. He's now a speaker all over the nation. A man with real heart, real soul, a real success with great relationships everywhere he goes, including the relationship he has with his lady. But here's the key. When he found himself in the hospital, 2/3 of his body burned off, and everyone else around him feeling sorry for themselves, saying, why me? He didn't ask that question. He asked, how can I use this? Pretty important question to ask. It's the difference in destinies. Why me versus how can I use this? He realized that being hurt and angry and frustrated wasn't going to change his life. So instead of looking at what he didn't have, he said to himself, what do I still have? Who am I really? Am I merely my body or am I something more? What am I really capable of now, even more so than before? And after his airplane accident, when now he's paralyzed from the waist down, and here he is in the hospital, he meets an incredibly attractive woman, a nurse, and he has the audacity with his entire face burned off, his skin burned off, paralyzed from the waist down. Here's the question he asked. How could I get a date with her? I said, are you kidding? When I was interviewing Mitchell, you really asked that question? He said, yeah. People said, that guy's insane. He's deluding himself. And that's what they told him inside there, his buddies that were sitting next to him there in the hospital. But you know what? A year and a half later, here he was in a relationship with her, and he still is to this day. See, questions provide answers. Questions change your life. But you must make sure you're asking empowering questions, not disempowering questions. And by the way, why questions can be disempowering questions or empowering. If you keep asking why me, again, that's what I call an endless loop. Be very careful of those. Let me give you two more distinctions about types of questions. Another way of chunking questions is, are they possibility questions or necessity questions? Interesting distinction I've made in my own life. See, possibility questions are usually languaged as, what if? What if this happens? What if I turn this whole thing around? What if I learn enough to really make my life work? What if I can learn enough to really make a difference in the world itself? What if I master this so well that I really can shape my own life and help other people everywhere I go? What if questions open up your whole life? And I ask a lot of those, because if you want to create new possibilities, it starts with your thought process. If you want to create new results, you got to think of new things. To think of new things, you got to ask possibility-oriented questions. Now the problem is some people just stay in possibility. They keep saying, what if this works out? What if it's great? What if it's always perfect? What if I turn the whole thing around? What if I get rich? What if I meet the woman I dreams? What if? But they don't ask necessity questions. Necessity questions, my language is, what must I do? What must I do to turn this thing around? Okay, that's what's possible. What must I do to make this work? What must I do to expand myself? What must I do to create financial independence? What must I do to influence my children better than the guy who sells crack on the street corner? See, you got to ask both kinds of questions, not just get stuck in one or the other. If all you ever ask is, what must I do? Your brain may begin to rebel and say, I don't want to have all these musts in my life. I don't want all this necessity. Life is a balance between possibility and necessity. You might want to look at the questions you're asking yourself and say, am I creating enough possibility? Am I backing it up with necessities to make that dream a reality? And a third way of chunking questions or looking at them is, are your questions matching-oriented questions or mismatching-oriented questions? What does that mean? Well, if you're in a matching mode, what it means is, if somebody brings up an idea or concept, you ask yourself questions like, oh, what do I like about that? You're kind of matching with that person's enthusiasm. Or what's great about this? Or how can I use this? Or how is this like what I want? For example, if you're going to work with someone on, let's say, creating an agreement in a negotiation, you don't want to start with constant differences. You want to see what things you agree on first so you can get some momentum in the relationship. What's great about this? What do I agree with? What's right? It creates a real rapport. In a brainstorming fashion with people, it helps you come up with lots of ideas when you're matching. If you said, I want to change the world, and somebody said, oh, that's stupid, and immediately mismatched you, you'd lose your enthusiasm. So they might say, yeah, I want to change it too. What are some ways we could do that? What if we did this? What if we did that? What if we started with ourselves? What if we started tomorrow? What if we started with what we're doing with our family? As you ask questions like that, questions that are matching, you get a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, a lot of momentum. However, there is a time for mismatching questions. Some people never ask, well, what if it doesn't work? And you got to ask that question too. See, I used to be guilty of being a pure possibility question asker who was always matching. I always said, okay, what's possible, and how is this like what I think it'll work out like? And I had all this enthusiasm, and I never looked, well, if it doesn't work out, and I got hurt a bit. So I threw my pendulum for a while and became a total necessity person. Well, what must we do all the time? And, what if it doesn't work? And that didn't work either. Life's a balance. So let's do this. Let's take a look at areas of your life very quickly. And this is going to be part of your homework, and I'll kind of help you with it by giving you a little bit of a jump start. And you may want to listen to these questions again. Maybe you want to write them down when this tape is done. But what I've done with myself that's really helped me tremendously is I've taken areas of my life, and now I don't do it with myself as much because I've already got those locked in, but I do it with other people when people are having challenges. Take areas of a person's life and find out, what are some questions? Just ask yourself, what are some questions that you ask yourself a lot when people upset you? Now, for me, for example, if I say, how could this person do this to me? What that did is it made me angry. It made me feel like they were doing something to me. I wasn't in control. I was resentful towards this person. What I've learned to do now is if somebody does something, like for example, let's say somebody comes up to you and they're really harsh with you, and you haven't even started to talk to them, you've done nothing wrong. A better question that I ask myself now, if somebody's really rude with me, for example, is I say, I wonder what makes this person treat people this way. Notice how different that feels. A lot different than, how could this person dare do this to me, to, I wonder what makes this person treat people this way. It changes my focus to what's going on with that person. And by doing that, I usually can find out something I can help that person with. And when I help them, they treat me great. See, part of life is being a leader. In order to be a leader, you got to control your focus. You can't just be in reaction. The way to do that is install within yourself, just by habit, a set of questions that empower you. So I put that question, by the way, when I realized it would work, put on the visor of my car. Because in my car was one of the places I asked, how could this person cut me off like this? And I look up and see this question and say, I wonder what's going on with that person right now that makes them treat people this way. Well, maybe they're trying to make it to the hospital. Maybe something's happened I'm not aware of. Maybe they're just stressed out of their mind. I wonder what's going on in their personal life. And it made me curious instead of angry. It really worked. So I want you to take the area of people upsets. And I want you to, at the best of your ability, think of what are some of the questions. Think of a time when you really got upset, and then what were you saying to yourself? What were you asking yourself? Write that down and come up with a better solution and write it down on your page, a better question. Here's another area I hear all the time in seminars. People are asking themselves questions like, why can't I get ahead financially? Or how come every time I start to do well financially, I sabotage myself? A better question to ask in the area of money is, what do I really want? What am I really committed to, not just interested in financially? Who's doing well that I could learn from? How could I develop financial security for a lifetime instead of just for the moment? See, if you ask questions like that, you can get the resources to turn yourself around financially. What other areas? How about food and weight? You know, I always love talking to people who can't lose weight, and the reason they can't lose weight is that very phrase. They ask questions like, how come I can never lose weight? Well, think about that. If you ask a question like, how come you can never lose weight, your brain goes, because you're a pig. I mean, come on, you don't want to do that. A better question than how come you can't lose weight is, how can I lose weight? Of course, then your brain will probably say, go on a diet. And then your brain will say, oh yeah, but that's painful. So ask a better question. Ask, how can I lose weight now and enjoy the process? See, if you add enjoy the process, your brain will come up with a fun way to lose weight. Maybe it has something to do with exercise. Maybe it has to do with sampling new kinds of unique foods that happen to also be better for you. There's all kinds of possibilities, but you don't get the possibility till you ask a better question. Now, I've dumped a lot on you in this tape. I've dumped so many questions on you. Your brain may be fried. The idea here is to stimulate you to think. I want you to realize thinking is nothing but the process of asking questions. And I want you to think about the quality of them. Are they empowering? Are they disempowering? Are they giving you new possibilities? Are they being backed up with the necessities necessary to turn dreams into reality? Are they causing you to build something or tear something down? And in asking you those questions and looking at them, realizing that if you want to, at any moment, you could change your whole life by asking questions.
This is the end of Side 4. Side 3 is already queued up for your listening.
Most of you who spend any time with me know that I've spent most of my life constantly searching for ways to make changes in human behavior and feelings. I mean, when you think about it, we all want to change one or two things in our lives. We either want to change how we feel, or we want to change what we're doing. And I've constantly searched for those. And so I've mastered a whole series of technologies, you know, from earliest days with positive thinking kind of stuff, to Gestalt therapy, to neurolinguistic programming, Ericksonian hypnosis, and then now the development of some of my own neuroassociative conditioning tools. But as I've been immersed in all those things, the one thing I've always looked for is what could produce results for us at the fastest tempo. How can we create a change in an instant that really could last? And over the years, I've learned a lot of things. I've been real proud of what I've been able to share with people. But in the last 2 years alone, I've begun to focus not only how to produce changes rapidly in people, but how to produce what I call global changes. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in essence, you could come to me and say, gosh, I want to stop biting my fingernails, or I want to be confident when I'm around, authority figures, or I want to stop overeating in this situation. And using a variety of tools, again, my own, or tools like neurolinguistics or Ericksonian hypnosis, could definitely assist you to do that and show you how to assist yourself. But I began to develop a new goal. And that goal is there an area of the mind that I could penetrate, and I could help other people to penetrate within themselves without a lot of extensive, detailed training, that could help us to make one change that would change all kinds of things in our lives. The domino effect, if you will, a processional effect. If you could just change this one thing, many things would change simultaneously. And over the last 2 years, as I've worked on neuroassociative conditioning and my destiny technologies, I've come up with a lot of incredibly simple tools that really do produce results. Not just results in one area of your life, but often multiple areas simultaneously. So of the many tools that I've developed that I consider to be simple and powerful, things that can create change so easily that almost anyone can use them immediately, the one I want to focus on today I call global metaphors. Now you might say, Tony, already it doesn't sound that simple. What is metaphor stuff? What is a metaphor? Well, think about it. A metaphor is nothing but a figure of speech that usually implies a comparison between two things that really aren't alike. For example, you might compare the fact that you feel a little hurt inside, you might call it a broken heart. Well, it isn't really a broken heart, but by describing it that way, you certainly have an impact on how you feel. Or if you say, I'm scarred emotionally, that's a metaphor. If we took your heart out right away, we'd see it wasn't broken. And if we looked at your emotions, if there were such a thing as a thing called emotions, we'd find out they really aren't scarred. And you know what? Most of us use metaphors continuously. They're a part of the human language. They're a part of the way that we communicate. But here's the challenge. Most of us rarely notice the impact we have by using these metaphors. Now, there's all kinds of metaphors that don't create negative impact. I don't want to imply that. A lot of them create positive feelings. Sometimes we say things like, well, you're looking at me with puppy dog eyes. Doesn't that make you feel a little different than you go, quit staring at me? So global metaphors are not necessarily bad. Or if you say something like, I'm tickled pink. Listen, you're not being tickled and you're not pink. But it sure feels good to use that metaphor, doesn't it? For some people, life's a bowl full of cherries. For other people, it's a war. Do you think that makes any difference in the way you look at life, the way you feel about life, the way you approach your life? See, we have metaphors for everything. Now, you may not call it metaphors, but think of a metaphor as any time you start to create a comparison, when you use a word to describe something that it really isn't. When you use a metaphor, by the way, you're taking a quantum leap and transforming your experience. Global metaphors change the way we perceive, the way that we think, the way we feel, what we experience of our lives. See, we don't experience reality. We experience our representation of reality. Again, what does that mean? Well, I've given you many metaphors to describe this. Metaphors are an easy way to teach. I give an example of how we feel is not based on reality, but what we focus on, what we represent inside our heads, how we picture things, what we say to ourselves. For instance, I think I've given you the example in the past of maybe going to meet your husband or wife for dinner one night, and you're supposed to be there at 6:30, and you get there at 6:30 and they're not there. How do you feel? Well, no problem for most people. 6:45, well, some people start to have a little change of state. 7 o'clock, some have even bigger change of state, and some people, by the way, get worried. Some people get upset, some get angry. What's the difference? The difference is not based on reality, it's based on the way we represent reality. And in this case, it's not being done metaphorically. The person who's worried is thinking things like, oh my gosh, what if this person was hit by a car? And they may be making pictures in their mind and representing to themselves a scenario that makes them feel fearful or concerned. Whereas the person that's upset is assuming a bunch of other things. They may be upset because they're representing inside their head that, gosh, this person really doesn't care, or they're not committed, or they're off with somebody else. And we have emotional reactions to however we represent our world. Now, the person may come through the door, and it was neither of those things. It wasn't that they didn't care, and it wasn't that they were in an accident. But during that time, during the time we were focusing in that way, representing things in that way, we felt those emotions. How does this relate to metaphors? Well, realize it's not life, but the way you represent life that determines the way you feel. So when you turn around and you say, gosh, I'm scarred emotionally, that is exactly how it feels. It does not feel just hurt a little bit. It feels scarred. And that metaphor will come up to make you feel the same way again and again and again. See, oftentimes we use metaphors out of convenience without looking at their impact. Again, both positive and negative. How do we normally use metaphors? Well, we use them, number one, to learn or to teach. See, oftentimes we can't understand something because we don't have the experience of it. A metaphor is a way of transferring understanding by taking something you already understand and attaching it to a new idea. For example, many people believe, even those of different faiths, that a man named Jesus Christ was one incredible teacher. His works have survived thousands of years. And the way he taught, the way he shared ideas and understandings often was through metaphor. He adapted his style of communication so that it met the understandings of the people he was speaking with. For example, when he went to fishermen, again, he didn't say, let's go recruit Christians. He said, I want to teach you to become fishers of men. Immediately, there was a whole set of understandings about how to get the job done then, because they knew how to fish. They knew what was involved, and they could apply those understandings to impacting people. While metaphors can certainly help us to understand things much more quickly, that's one of their powers, they can also sometimes, while they're empowering us, limit us just a slight bit. Because we've got to realize our metaphor is not the same as reality, but we start responding like it's identical. A modern example of this would be studying physics. For years, people who were studying atoms were taught that an atom is like a solar system, in that in the middle is this nucleus, which is like the sun. And then revolving around it on the outside are protons and electrons. Well, with that understanding and using that metaphor, what rules come with that metaphor? What preconceived notions? Well, one would be that these electrons and protons stayed equidistant or a certain exact distance away from the nucleus as they revolved around it. But this isn't true. They vary in distance constantly. And as a result of this, a lot of people are locked into a mindset that kept them from being able to solve certain problems in physics. So we have to be selective in the metaphors that we utilize, because metaphors have tremendous power. They can help us share ideas. They can help us to share our emotion. They can intensify our emotion or lessen it depending upon which metaphor we select. I mean, think about it. All of poetry is really based on metaphor, isn't it? But we must know the impact of the metaphors we utilize, and we need to be conscious in our selection. Let's take a look at some of the impact of metaphors you may have that you're not even aware of, because you may be sitting there saying, metaphors, I don't use this word, I don't use metaphors. Oh, yes, you do. They're a living part of your language. Let's say, for example, what is life? And here's a nice way of thinking about metaphors, by the way. If you use the word is or like, those are good ways. Or as, like, is, or as are usually when you're starting to link things. You're taking something that isn't the same as what you're talking about and making it the same. So, for example, what is life like? Now, for some people, they say, well, life is like a war. Now, I want you to think about that one metaphor. If you adopt that metaphor with it, you begin to adopt a series of beliefs that affect the way you think and the way you feel about life itself, what you'd be willing to do and not do. A whole set of rules and ideas and preconceived notions come with any metaphor you adopt. So if life's a war, what's life like? Tell me. You might say, well, it's tough. Well, it means it's about death as well. You might say, well, it's going to be me against somebody else. You might say there are going to be battles. You might say, well, if life is really a battle itself, then maybe, I'm going to get hurt. All of those filters will affect your decisions and your feelings. Now, some people say, no, life's not a war. It's not a battle. Life's a test, though. Well, great. What comes with the belief that life is a test? What comes with that global belief? Well, if it's a test, again, maybe it's going to be tough. Maybe you better study. Maybe you better be prepared. Maybe, again, you could fail. And some people look at life as a test. For example, I was reading an article not long ago where they interviewed Donald Trump. And he was saying, well, life's a test. You either pass or you fail. If you're not in first, then you failed. Can you imagine how that metaphor has affected his decisions in his life and how he feels emotionally? For some people, life's a game. Now, if life's a game, what would you believe about life? How would that affect you? As an ultimate filter to all your thinking and all your beliefs. Well, it might be fun. What a concept. It might be somewhat competitive. It might be a chance for you to really play a lot and enjoy a lot more. Some people say, well, if it's a game, then there's going to be losers. Other people say, well, it'll take a lot of skill. It all depends on what beliefs you attach to the word game. But with that one metaphor, again, you have a set of filters that are going to affect the way you think and the way you feel. What if we thought life was sacred? I hope you do think that. But if that was your primary metaphor for life, some people say, well, then it would be something that you would cherish. Other people say, well, then I'd be really careful with it. What if you thought life was a dance? Wouldn't that be a little different? What comes with life being a dance? Well, it's something beautiful. It's something you do with other people. It has grace. It has rhythm. It has joy. Maybe it has sexuality tied into it. Who knows? Maybe it's a lot of fun. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way of looking at life. Maybe life's a gift. Right? Think about how your life changes and how you look at your entire life differently just by changing the global metaphor you adopt inside your head. Are we limited to metaphors about life? Oh, no. We got metaphors about our work, for example. Some people go, yeah, I got to go to the prison today. You think that might affect the way you feel about what you do? Other people see it as, oh my gosh, I'm going to go be with my friends. I'm going to go join that team. I know a lot of business people who use global metaphors for their businesses they own, and it's things like, well, it's my asset. And they look at people as either assets or liabilities. And do you think that affects the way they treat people, the way they think about people, the way they connect with people? That one belief changes it all. In my business, I think of it as a family. And you know what? That totally changes the connection I have with the people that I work with every single day, because we're all one. We're all together. Some people look at it as a unified team, a team that's going to go out and win. Other people look at a business as being like a garden, where every day you've got to do things to maintain it and somehow improve it so that someday you can reap a reward. See, again, the metaphors you select will affect you tremendously. And I'm here to tell you that these metaphors are going on whether you're aware of it consciously or not. That's the scary part, because you may have never consciously decided what metaphors you wanted to use to describe life. Where did you get your metaphors? Well, probably you picked them up from people around you. You may have picked them up from your parents or from your friends. And again, you didn't think about their impact. It just seemed convenient or fun to say, or maybe you didn't even think about it at all. It just became a habit. I'll give you an example of how I really learned all this, the power of metaphors. Because certainly I heard the word metaphors before, but I thought of metaphors as only being stories. Or maybe a quote would be a metaphor, like one that guided my life during tough times when I felt a little fearful was, a ship in a harbor is safe, but that's not what ships were built for. So that's a great metaphor. It instills a belief. It makes you think of yourself like a ship, and you got to make it through the storms and everything else, but that's what life is for. That's what life is about. I'll never forget years ago, I was doing a seminar, a certification program, and in the middle of the seminar, about a week into it, this one gentleman jumped up and started screaming at the top of his lungs and stabbing out at people with his bare hands like he was holding a knife. And he started saying, I'm blacking out, I'm blacking out, I'm blacking out. Well, the psychiatrist in the front row said, he's having a psychotic episode. Fortunately, I didn't take his view of things, or I would have been in deep trouble, because maybe I don't know how to deal with psychotic episodes, but I sure know how to change people's states. And I didn't know it at the time, but I know how to change people's metaphors. So I came up to this guy and I yelled, okay, then just white it out. White it out. You know how to do it. Use that stuff when you were typing. White it out. And the guy went, huh? It just totally broke his state. And all these people that were running for him paused to see what was going to happen. I said, come on, do it. You know how to use it. Just white it all out. And all of a sudden his face changed and his body changed. He started to breathe differently. And he looked at me and I said, so how's that? He said, that feels a lot better. I said, well, sit down. And I went right on to speak. And everybody looked dumbfounded, and the psychiatrist was dumbfounded. I was kind of dumbfounded, except I had to look cool, like I knew what I was doing. So I just went on and continued, right? But what I'd done, I wasn't aware of it, is I had changed his metaphor. And by the way, I didn't have another challenge with a guy, and he came up to me 2 days later, and he said, I don't know what it was the other day. He said, but I turned 40 that day, and he said, I just lost it. Which, by the way, is that a metaphor? Losing it? How do you lose yourself? You're here. Hello? Are you here? I'm noticing. I'm talking. Let me see your hands. Now, we got to realize we oftentimes make these metaphors as if they're real. They're not real. They're just figures of speech. But we start responding to them like they're real. And he said, I just lost it. And he said, I was experiencing this unbelievable thing. Like I felt like stabbing out and jamming out because I was in this blackness and I felt like it was swallowing me up. He said, but boy, when I put that white out on there, he said, everything just brightened right up and I felt totally different. And he said, I haven't had a challenge with it since. He said, I went and read the paper that day and I started thinking of new thoughts, and he said, you know what? He said, I feel fine today. And he was fine the rest of the time, just by changing one little metaphor. I didn't even know what I was doing then. Realize how easy it is to create a change. A woman came to me in a therapeutic context a few years ago, and she was a former Miss America. Very, very incredible lady, powerful woman who really cares about people. But she hadn't been able to sleep for years. Why? Well, simply because as a young girl, she was molested by her father year after year after year. I think it was from the time that she was approximately 6 or 7 years old up until the time she was about 14. And she tried to tell people and she tried to communicate it. And when she tried to bring it to the family, they all tried to deny it had happened because it was so shameful for them all. And as a result, she really beat herself up. And she'd been through every kind of therapy you can imagine. She was taking drugs to go to sleep. And so I sat down with her and I started working with her. And I said, well, tell me, what's going on? Why is this happening? Why can't you sleep? What's going on? And she didn't tell me at first what was going on. She first told me through metaphor. She said, I don't know, I just feel like I'm marble, like I'm stone. I'm shiny and bright on the outside. And everybody thinks I'm so wonderful, but on the inside, she said, I'm hard and I'm cold and I can't feel anything. And I said, well, you're marble, huh? And I said, zzz. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm drilling holes in the marble. She looked at me like I was crazy, which immediately interrupted her pattern. I said, let's take a look in here. What do you see? Help me out. What do you see there behind that marble? And we looked through the little cracks in the marble. What happened there? She goes, well, it's really loving and warm in there. And that little thing that seems like nothing, see, when we use a metaphor, we kind of trance ourselves out. We start distorting reality. So why not distort it in a way that serves you? And as I got inside there, I started following everything she said with metaphors. And we entered in behind the marble. We jackhammered out the rest of it and got inside there and started flowing on this river of love. But it was stopped up at places. So what do you think we did? We brought out the liquid plumber and plumbed it all out and started flowing some more, and eventually we got to this room. And this is the room that kept her up at night. There was all these sounds coming out of it. And as we got closer and closer, and by my asking her questions and keeping her talking about metaphors, she told me that there was this man in the room, and he was playing the piano. And I said, what's he playing the piano for? And she said, I don't know. I said, well, ask him. And she said, well, it's because he's trying to keep me awake, so I'll be protected in case my dad comes. I said, well, your dad's no longer here, is he? She said, no. I said, well, look how old that guy is. Now, by the way, when people use metaphors, they're highly suggestible because their metaphors are made up anyway. She goes, yeah, he is old. I said, isn't it time for him to retire? And she looked at me and smiled, and she said, yeah. I said, well, go give him a big hug and thank him for taking such good care of you. And tell him it's time for him to retire. Tell him he can come back and play, though, but during the daytime. And she did. And it was amazing? I'm cutting the story short for obvious reasons, but for 2.5 hours we did this. One metaphor after another, changing them and changing them and changing them. And the next day she was able to sleep without drugs for the first time. See, metaphors have more of an impact than we realize. And changing a metaphor can change your whole life. You got to discover what the metaphors are you're using so that you can change them consciously in a way that really enriches your experience of life. So what can you do if you find yourself saying things like, well, I'm at the end of my rope? Put the rope down. That's what you can do, and walk away. When people start doing that stuff, that's what I tell them. I go, I'm at the end of my rope. I say, well, I don't say tie a knot and hang on for dear life, baby. I say, well, step the thing aside and walk over here. And they get this dumbfounded look on their face, and then all of a sudden they start to grin, and it instantly breaks their pattern. Remember, whenever we have a pattern of looking at the world or making things up in our head, if we do something radical to interrupt that pattern, and we keep interrupting it, pretty soon we can't get back to it. Anytime you find you've constructed your world in a way that creates limitations, interrupt it and replace it with power. Replace it with something that's more loving. Replace it with something that's more fun. See, if you find yourself saying things like, oh, I'm over the edge, maybe an alternative might be enjoy the slide. There's all kinds of possibilities. Be creative. Be playful. Now, here's the challenge. A lot of people get like one metaphor, and they filter everything through that one metaphor. Like everything in life is a war. Everything is a battle. It doesn't matter whether it be a relationship or whether it be their business or anything else. See, no one metaphor is the right metaphor. In fact, our real goal is to be flexible in using our metaphors, even in my own business, where I saw my businesses as being my extended family. And I didn't call it extended, it was my family. Because of that, I do almost anything for the people in my business. I care about them tremendously. And because of that, I could never fire anybody. How do you fire a family member? Sometimes I needed to. So once in a while I had to change it and say, okay, it's not my family. What this is a vehicle to reaching and impacting people. And there are parts of this vehicle that need to be updated or maintained. Or there's parts of this vehicle that have to be taken out and reinstalled with an updated version. The bottom line is if what you're doing isn't working, change your metaphors. Now, what are some examples of empowering metaphors? Well, one of the most empowering ones that has guided my life through tough times is the metaphor of seasons. Because when times are the toughest, you need to be able to make some kind of meaning out of that. And it's tough when you're in the midst of it. Your brain just goes, oh my gosh, this is going to go on forever. But what I began to do is, hey, life is like the seasons. And I'm in winter right now. But the great thing is if you adopt this metaphor, what always follows winter? Spring, sun comes out. You're no longer freezing to death, right? Where all of a sudden you're able to plant new seeds. You get to notice all of nature and the beauty and the life and growth and all those wonderful things. And then there's summer. You're doing everything right. You planted your seeds and it's hot and it's warm and you either burn out your seed during that time if you're not careful, if you don't nurture it, or maybe you get tan. All depends on how you look at things. Once you got a metaphor, you can lay metaphors on top of metaphors. Kind of fun. And then there's fall, where you get to reap your rewards. And sometimes you've planted a seed and you made it through the hot summer and you get to fall and it doesn't work out well. Well, that's true. Sometimes that happens in life too. Sometimes before you reap, a hailstorm comes in and destroys your crop. But see, if you believe in seasons, you know that you're going to get another chance. Also, as I began to look at that metaphor, I started coming up with the idea that, hey, in winter you don't have to freeze to death, you could ski. Again, laying another metaphor on top of a metaphor. We need to find things that empower us. And during my darkest time, that metaphor almost always pulled me out. Or another one a friend of mine shared with me, who, by the way, wrote a book with a metaphor as a title. His name was Harvey McKay, called How to Swim with the Sharks and Not Get Eaten Alive. That's kind of a metaphor for how he felt about certain people he was doing business with and that you may be doing business with. By the way, one challenge with adopting a metaphor, you don't want to start seeing everyone as a shark. Seeing everybody as your friend, seeing everybody as like your puppy dog, or seeing everybody as your associate or partner in life is a great idea, except when that person is a shark. In which case, they're operating from a different set of frames. They have a different set of rules. So you don't want to see everybody as a shark, everybody's your partner. You want to see the best in people and be able to change metaphors where it's useful. But the story he shared with me is one that shaped his life. And it was about persistence, because Harvey's one of the most persistent people I know. I have tremendous respect for him. And that story is the story of the stonecutter. His father told him that the reason he would never give up, and the reason his father became so successful, was because he believed in stonecutting. He said, I want you, son, to become a stonecutter as well. He said, what a stonecutter does, he takes this big hammer and he smacks this giant boulder as hard as he can. And he hits it again and again and again and again. And you know what happens? He could hit it 100 times, 200, 300, and not even have a scratch. But he'd keep on doing it. Now, most people say, what are you, an idiot? Can't you see it's not working? But a stonecutter's smart. A stonecutter knows just because you're not getting the feedback you want initially doesn't mean you're not making progress. Pretty good belief to have. He said, you keep hitting and hitting, and at some point, maybe on the second 100, third 100, maybe on the 1,004th hit, the stone splits open right there. It doesn't just crack. In one hit, it breaks open. And again, it wasn't that hit that did it. It was the constant pressure being applied to the challenge at hand. So Harvey's metaphor for himself is, I'm a stonecutter. That's what makes me successful. That metaphor works for me as well, maybe for you. I know years ago I began to have this belief, and I was explaining to people that it didn't look like I was making progress, but I had my wrench on a fire hydrant, and I was pushing on that thing as hard as I could, and once it opened, it was just going to keep pouring forever with just tremendous force, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. But that metaphor kept me persisting, kept me going. Your metaphors don't have to be elegant. They just need to be effective in getting you to take action. By the way, whole cultures are shaped by metaphors. A great example is if you decide to go trekking in Nepal, and you meet people along the side of the road, strangers, people you've never met before. The one thing you notice most about these people, very much like Fijians, they're incredibly loving people. These huge smiles and this warm welcome you get as if they've known you forever. And you know why? As they call to you, they call out a phrase, which in Nepalese means little brother or big brother. They just decide which one you are. I tend to get to be big brother because of my size most of the time. But whatever it is, little sister or big sister, everyone is addressed as their brother or sister. Would that change the way you approach people if that was the filter you had on every human being you met? See, as a society, we've adopted this idea about 10, 15 years ago of planet Earth or spaceship Earth. That sounded like a great metaphor, but it didn't work. You know why? You can't get emotional about a spaceship. We don't notice, we don't treat the Earth when we think of it as a spaceship the way we do when we look at it as, let's say, Mother Earth. What if you thought that everything that you received in your life, you were receiving from the breast of your Mother Earth? And that's what was nourishing your family. Some of you are like raising an eyebrow right now, but it's a different metaphor, isn't it? You'd probably be a little more sensitive. You probably wouldn't put some toxic waste right on your mother's breast, would you? You'd probably think a little different first. We've got to be really careful. We've got to think long-term in the development of our metaphors, not short-term. In fact, most boats are ships, as well as aircraft. We usually relate to them or describe them as a she, not a he. We have female names for them, or we say, take good care of her. Why do we say her? Why don't we say, take care of him? Or, yeah, take care of Joe here, my boat. You know, we might treat it a little different, right? Yeah, I slap the thing around a little bit, but no, not a she. We're delicate. We caress her. We take care of her. We nurture her. The metaphor works. It enhances that area of life. And you know, there are many cultures, not just the country you live in, but what you do for a living provides another culture with different metaphors. For example, oftentimes lawyers have some challenges in their personal lives and can't imagine why when they come home and try and apply the same metaphors that they use at work at home. They start to have a conversation with their wife or their husband, and next thing you know, they're trying to find out what's wrong with their argument and what their evidence is for backing up what they've said, and they try to have a debate. And that doesn't work too well in a personal relationship. Or I'll never forget working one time with a couple, one of whom was a quarterback, a star quarterback in the NFL. And he was dating and considering marrying, and she him, a woman who was a pretty powerful movie star. And they had all these problems in their relationship, and most of them seemed to be coming from his upsets. He was upset with her all the time because she was breaking his rules. And almost all of them, though, came into focus as soon as I realized, wait a second, this guy is a quarterback. What are the rules for someone, metaphorically, who's playing a game constantly where they're a quarterback? Well, number one is, you got to run the show. You call the plays. People respond to you. You're the director. You're making things happen. And as you're moving up to become the best, you have to be the star. Even though everyone else needs to be a star too, they need to be a star with you. And so the bottom line is, this person going off on her own, deciding what she wanted for her life and how she was going to be, and her being a star without having to catch a pass from him, that didn't go over too big with him. Created a lot of challenges. Or an example would be a jet pilot I did some work with. This guy is always finding something wrong with people. He's always seemed to get himself into fights. And the reason was he thrived on having an enemy. You know, without an enemy, there was no way he could really be the best he could be. Or maybe one of my favorites, because it was so simple to make a change in, was this man who was so disassociated. his family members and his kids just couldn't get through to him, didn't feel connected to him, and they really resented him because he didn't give any feelings and he was always directing them. You know what he was? An air traffic controller. You know, as an air traffic controller, he had to make himself not be stressed. He had to stay disassociated. The guy on the radio heard his voice going, okay, well, just keep circling around for another couple of hours. It'll be okay. That wouldn't have gone over too big, right? So he learned to, when there's a trouble, say, yes, just make a circle and I'll get back to you. You know, that certain disassociated fashion works wonderful there. It doesn't work at home. So we got to be careful that we don't carry the metaphors that work in one context, like the environment we work in, into another context, like our relationships or our businesses or our families or our friends. So what are some of the metaphors that you use daily in your day-to-day life without thinking about it? Do any of them come from your work, for example? Or do you describe yourself in ways like I'm burnt out versus maybe you could have something like I'm recharging? Or do you get upset and say it's an eye for an eye? Maybe you need to come up with a different metaphor, one that's less intense. Or instead of feeling like you've got a mountain full of work to do or millions of things to do, maybe you've got a few things to do and you start taking that mountain and representing it as a stack. Maybe that feels a little different. You know, you want to make sure you set yourself up to win the game, and the way to win the game is pick the right metaphor. Let's take a second look at relationships. What are the metaphors you have for relationships? Is the person you're in a relationship with your partner in life? Are they your team member? Are they your lover? Are they your better half? Or do you talk about them as your dictator, the old ball and chain, the old lady, the old man, you know, that jerk, an idiot I live with? You know, do you think those metaphors might make a difference in how they feel? I'll never forget, I had this one lady in a date with Destiny seminar. Every time she talked about her husband, she'd talk about this jerk I'm with, this idiot. And so I turned to her and I said, ma'am, I'm sure you have a lot of challenges, and I'm sure this man has made a lot of mistakes, and I know you haven't made any. But I'm just curious, do you think your relationship's going to get any better as long as you hold that he's a jerk and an idiot? I said, also, notice what's happening here. You call him a jerk and idiot, and the times he's talked about you, I hear him say things like, you're the love of his life, or you're his better half, or you're his gift from God. Maybe you ought to re-examine the metaphor you're using to describe him to yourself and to other people, and pick something that's more appropriate. Because sometimes we use a metaphor so often it becomes habitual, and we start thinking the metaphor is real, and it's just not. How about kids? What are your metaphors for your kids? Are they the Rugrats? You know, one of my friends who obviously doesn't have kids used to have a metaphor. He called them barfers. You know, because little kids do. Whenever you're around, they barf all over you. So as long as you hold that metaphor, can you imagine how he responded? He just recently, by the way, got to fill in for Santa Claus at a department store, and he didn't want to do it. A bunch of us put him up to it and set him up so he had to do it. He got to have hundreds of these barfers come and sit on his lap, and you know what? Most of them, with one exception, didn't barf. And the bottom line is he got a whole other view of what children were about, and he got to change his metaphor, and I called them cuddlies. And you think that might change the way you feel? You better believe it. Brats doesn't usually make you want to have more of them, nor does it make you want to take good care of them or nourish them. So you got to really make sure you got the appropriate metaphor in each area. Now, how about the metaphors for your body? What is your body? Is it a machine? Is it a disaster? You know? Is it an opportunity for growth? Is it a vehicle? Is it the temple? See, most people don't treat it like a temple. There was a gentleman who we learned to call Maestro, and Maestro was just this wonderful guy who was extremely overweight. They've been trying to lose weight through every diet you can imagine. But when I got him up on stage and we did one of these things I call the rules realignment, a special technique we have for changing the rules that your brain uses to make decisions, as we got through it, it became clear that he associated being fat to being spiritual. Because he had all these metaphors of that in order to be spiritual, what you had to do is be like the giant guru, you know, in India. And so sure enough, he actually linked that to being more. And he thought, you know, if you're this big, then the only people that are going to get through to you are spiritual people, because other people are going to be turned off by your fat. And he said, I really think that, you know, he said, I know it doesn't make any sense, but he says, it just feels real to me that fat equals spiritual. And so I gave him a metaphor. I said, well, I don't think that. He said, I think God loves fat people. I said, well, you know, I think God loves everybody, but I think what he does with fat people is just sticks them on a skewer and roasts them above hell. You should have seen his face. Now, obviously, I don't believe this, but it was a major pattern for him, and he got the picture in his head. It was pretty intense. And we began to work on a better metaphor for his body, because he said his body was nothing. So, well, what is your body? What's it like? He said, it's like nothing. It's like just there. It's just a vehicle. I said, is it a quality vehicle? He said, well, it doesn't matter if you have quality vehicles as long as it gets you there. So we got him to adopt the idea of a temple. And you know what? That was the only major change. With that, a bunch of his rules changed. Because when we went to pick up food, he said, would I put this in a temple? By the way, he's lost 90 pounds in the last 90 days simply by adopting that metaphor and adopting it fully. I mean, living it every single day. It's become habitual to him. He said that once in a rare while, if he finds himself going down an old aisle that used to be familiar, he just pictures that body on a skewer above hell. And he said that's all it takes is a metaphor to knock him right out of it and get him out of those aisles he doesn't belong in. One of the most important distinctions that I made about global metaphors, having utilized them so much and worked with people on an ongoing basis, is that whether people know it or not, they've got global metaphors for themselves. They have metaphors for what they do for a living. And the challenge is if you don't consciously select your own metaphors, then what happens is your environment tends to create the metaphors for you. And sometimes those metaphors are disempowering, not empowering. I know for myself, for example, people used to ask me, well, what do you do? What are you exactly? I mean, you're not a psychologist, and, what are you, a motivator? And I said, no, I'm not a motivator, because I'm not a motivator. What a terrible metaphor. You pump somebody up, and, a little bit later they drop right back down again. It's like taking a warm bath, and I've never considered myself just to be a motivator. Hopefully what I do helps people to motivate themselves by having them change some of their core beliefs and helping them develop strategies on how to produce consistent and specific results. But being a motivator is not what I want to be known as. So some people say, well, gosh, if you don't know what you are, I know what you are. You're a guru. And I got to see that in Life magazine and newspapers. And sometimes to this day, media will cover me as the guru of something. I don't want to be somebody's guru. I'm not any better than anybody else, and I'm not here to go out in the world and be everybody else's leader they're going to come pay homage to. That's not what I'm about. So I thought, well, I'm a teacher. But I thought, oh, no, I'm more than just a teacher. Humble as I am, there's got to be something more. And somebody said, you're a comedian. I thought, well, that's a nice compliment, but there's some serious stuff here. So I finally came up with, I'm a peak performance consultant. Well, that's accurate, but it's not very emotional. It didn't really create the emotion inside of me. We all need to find a metaphor for describing who we are, what we do. And one day I finally got it. I'm a coach. I thought, that's really what I am. What is a coach? To me, a coach is somebody who really cares. It's somebody who's warm and committed, and they're your friend. They also are a person that's going to challenge you. They're not going to let you off the hook just because they're your friend. They're the kind of person who knows they've got knowledge and they've got experience. They've been there before. They have lots of distinctions. And the key is, yes, they do teach you new information, new strategies, and new skills and how to get results that are measurable. But a good coach affects your beliefs. And a good coach gets you to not only know what to do, they get you to do what you know. And that's when results really change in our lives. And I thought, that's what I am. And by the way, a coach isn't any better than the people they're coaching. In fact, some coaches coach people that are better than them. They just seem to have a few distinctions because that's been their area of focus. And you know what? As soon as I started using that metaphor for what I was, that I'm a success coach, I help to coach people on how to achieve what they really want more quickly and more easily. It changed the way I thought about myself. It made my work warmer. It made me enjoy everything I was doing. I said, yeah, that's who I am. I'm a coach. I've also found that having metaphors to describe what my seminars are really helped me out tremendously to be more effective and help me to translate to other people what they were really about. Now you say, well, that's just in the seminar business, right? Wrong. It's true of your business. It's true of your avocation. You've got to create a metaphor that creates a greater sense of richness and joy and fun and playfulness. Then you'll get more out of yourself. I'll give you an example that's measurable. I know several years back, PIE, P-I-E, the trucking service, they had some major challenges, and they found that 60% of all their shipping contracts were erroneous. It was costing them more than $250,000 a year. Well, they did an intensive study, and they found out that 56% of these errors were based on misidentification of containers. Well, they brought in a man named Dr. Deming, the man who's both famous and infamous in American culture. He's an American consultant who went over to Japan and whose philosophies on management and quality have been adopted wholeheartedly by the Japanese. In fact, they give away each year the Deming Award. It's the highest award a Japanese company can receive, and it is always broadcast on national television. In fact, over there, it said in the Wall Street Journal that Deming is considered to be up there right next to God, at least in the business circles. The bottom line is, based on their understanding of Deming's work, they decided to change the view that the workers had of themselves to get them to be more quality-oriented. And instead of seeing themselves as workers or truckers, they started telling people, you know what you guys are? You're craftsmen. At first, people looked at it kind of funny, but then they got hooked on the idea. They said, yeah, I'm a craftsman. And they kind of teased each other and smiled about it. But you know what? When you adopt a metaphor, along with it, you adopt a set of rules of how to think about yourself and how to behave and what to do. As a result, in less than 30 days, they cut their 60% erroneous shippings down to less than 10%, saving more than $250,000 a year. Metaphors pay. Metaphors make the difference in how you feel. Metaphors change the way other people see you. Select them carefully. Select them intelligently. Select them in a way that deepens and enriches the experience of your life and the people you care about. Become a student of metaphors and become sensitized to them, and your whole life can change. Anytime you hear a metaphor that creates limits, just step in and offer a new one. Offer a new possibility. Break a pattern and give them a new choice, including yourself. Take out your journal, and I want you to write down the following. Number one, what is life? And I want you to come and write down, number one, the metaphors you already linked to it. In other words, life is like what? It's as if life was what? And just brainstorm everything you think of it, because I bet you got more than one metaphor you link to life. When you're in a lousy state, you probably call it a battle or a war. When you're in a good state, maybe you think of it as a gift. But I want you to write them all down. And then I want you to decide, out of the list that you make, if life is this, then what does it mean to me? Like, if life is sacred, what does that mean? If life is a dream, what does that mean? If all the world's a stage, what does that mean? Each of your metaphors, by the way, will have benefits and they may have limitations. And all the world's a stage may be great because it may mean that, hey, you get a chance to go out there and make a difference and do something and you'll be heard. But also may make you be a person that's always performing. You don't want to be that. You want to be real. So take a look at the metaphors you have available. I want you to also make a list, number two, of all the metaphors you link to relationship or marriage. Take a look at those metaphors. Are they empowering or disempowering? And then again, just being aware of your metaphors can change them. See, conscious awareness alone can transform things because your brain will start to say, that doesn't work. That's ridiculous. And you can adopt a new one so easily. That's the beauty of this technology. It's so darn simple. And thirdly, I want you to pick another area of your life that impacts you most, whether it be your business, whether it be your family or your children, whether it be your ability to learn. What are your metaphors for what learning is? So I want you to pick the third one for yourself, but write down the metaphors you currently use, brainstorm them out, look at their impact. Ask yourself, what are the consequences, positive consequences and negative consequences of this metaphor? And then after you've done that, see if you can't create some new ones you've never thought of before and decide, from now on, I'm going to think of life as these 4 or 5 things to start with at least. Life is not a war. Life is not a test. Life is a game. Life is a dance. Life is sacred. Life is a gift. Life is joy. Whatever it is for you. And decide you're going to live those for the next 30 days. So if somebody asks you, how's it going? You might turn back to them and say, the gift is being enjoyed. And look at you and say, what? So nothing. Just my global metaphor for life. We're ultimately in control of our destiny by the decisions we make about what things mean and what we're going to do. See, it's easy to get seduced in life and say, well, the reason I'm not achieving what I want is because XYZ happened when I was a child, or someone didn't give me the resources I really wanted, or because the weather's this way, or because the economy's this way. But the reality is, it's never the events, it's always us. So, what controls that? Well, you and I have a system, an unconscious system for evaluating what things mean and what we should do. It's determining our actions every single day, and therefore our destiny. And it has 5 parts to it. Number 1, the state that you're in. The state you're in mentally and emotionally at any moment in time is going to radically shift the way you interpret what things mean and what you're going to do. Hey, if you're in a frustrated state, you and I both know things don't carry the same meaning as when you're feeling really loving and happy and excited. You interpret it totally differently just by state alone. Secondly, the questions you ask yourself constantly affect what you're evaluating, what you focus on, and the meaning that you take from it. Whether you ask yourself disempowering questions like, how come I always screw things up? And having your brain respond by saying, because you're an idiot. Or whether you ask questions like, how can I turn this around? How can I utilize this experience to make my life greater? That changes completely what you focus on, what things mean, and what you're going to do with your life. It changes the event immediately and gives you control. The third element is values. See, the values that you hold constantly determine what you pay attention to most, what you try to move towards in your life. Is your life focused on contribution? Is your life focused on love or security or adventure or passion or success? Whatever it is, it's pulling you in a direction and shaping your destiny. You also have certain things you value because you want to avoid them. Certain emotional states like avoiding frustration or anger or humiliation or feeling like you're bored. All of these emotions also shape what we want to move away from in our lives, and therefore they affect the direction of our lives and our destiny. The fourth element in our system of evaluating what things mean to us and what we're going to do in our life is our belief systems. We have a whole variety of beliefs about ourselves, about other people, about possibility, about capability. We also have specific rule beliefs. Beliefs that say, if you do this, then it means that. If you don't do this, then it means something else. All of these preconceived notions that we've developed within ourselves are filtering our experience of life on a daily basis. And different beliefs create a different destiny. If you hold the belief that people are rotten, no good, and they'll take advantage of you if you give them half a chance, obviously you're going to make different decisions as to what to focus on, what things mean when people do things, and what you're going to do about it. Then if you had a belief that said something like, people are basically good, they really do care, if you give them half a chance, they'll go for it. So we've talked about these issues in the past. But the one we've not talked about is the fifth element, references. You see, where do you think your beliefs have come from? Where do you think your values came from? You came from references. Well, what is this big word, references? References are nothing but the experiences of your life. But your experiences can be broken down into many different ways. There are the experiences that you've had consciously and the experiences you picked up unconsciously. Those little things that you never noticed that have filtered inside your brain. Your references aren't just limited to the story of your life, but quite literally, your references might be considered metaphorically as like a giant file box in your brain where everything you've ever seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled is all stored. Now, some of those references are organized. You put them together to come up with a specific meaning to help you make decisions in the future. And those organized references we call beliefs. You say, wait a second, now I'm really confused. Well, think about it. What is a belief? A belief is nothing but a feeling of certainty about what something means. If you say, I believe I'm really intelligent, you're saying, I feel certain I'm intelligent. What makes you certain? You have references. Yeah, you've had experiences in your life where you learned something, or you took on a challenging environment and you were able to master it, or maybe somebody told you that you were intelligent, or you passed some tests. All of those experiences take the idea, the simple idea that maybe you don't believe to start with that you're intelligent, and make them solid by putting these legs underneath it. Think of references like the legs of belief. They make a belief solid, they make it real, they make you believe it. They make you feel certain about what something means. To give you a clearer picture, think of an idea as being like a tabletop that has no legs. It's not very solid, pretty wobbly. But the way we take that idea, whatever it is, let's say the idea is that you're sexy. The only way you're going to believe you're sexy is if you feel certain you're sexy. Now, I know you already believe this, so this is probably a moot point. But let's take it as an example. You just say, I'm sexy. You can say that and not believe it, not feel certain that it's true. But if you do say, I'm sexy and believe it, that is, you feel that certainty inside, why do you? Because underneath that tabletop, you got some references. Now, I'm not going to call on these people, but I'm sure you have some, right? You have some people you've had some experiences with who told you what a great, sexy person you were. Maybe, you looked in the mirror one day and you compared it with some other picture of somebody else and said, I'm so much sexier than him or her. I don't know what you've done, but I'm sure you got plenty of those things. Or maybe somebody looked across at you while you were in bumper-to-bumper traffic and kind of got your attention and smiled at you and pointed at you. And you said, see, that means I'm sexy. The truth is they were telling you to move, but you interpreted it as a reference that you were sexy. The point is really simple. We can take references for virtually anything and make them back up any idea we want. Hey, I got a question for you. Do you have references to back up the idea that people are rotten and they'll take advantage of you if you give them half a chance? Now, I know maybe you don't have personal references, but have you read about people who have done this? Have you heard about people who have done this? Have you ever had any experiences in your life? I know you don't believe it, but do you have references to back it up? Yes or no? You and I both know the answer is yes. Don't you also, though, have references to back up the idea that people really do care, and if you give them half a chance, they'll want to help you? If you don't have them personally, you certainly have read about them. The other day I heard about a man on television again, found $35,000 and returned it and refused to even be on camera. He just said it was the right thing to do and had to give it back. And it turned out it was the life savings of a 68-year-old woman. But he didn't want anybody to know he'd done it. Why? Because he has some references in his background as to what that would mean if he were to take credit. And maybe it's different than you. You might say, well, why would he do that? I mean, he doesn't have to boast about it, but why wouldn't he at least, come on camera and say, I just thought it was the right thing to do. Why wouldn't he do that? See, if you've ever wondered why people do what they do, why they do something different than you, I have the answer. References. They have different references than you do. They've organized those references based on their life experiences to develop some beliefs. They believe if they were to do certain things in a certain way, it would mean something good or it would mean something bad. And all of our beliefs, based on the references of our life, are shaping our life moment to moment. It's literally directing our destiny. So maybe we should take control of this process. Think of it metaphorically. All the different reference experiences of your life, both the good and bad, the challenging and the exciting, all of these have been woven together to create the fabric of your life. And from that fabric, you've made decisions about beliefs and values that you were going to cut from that fabric. In other words, there's plenty of fabric there. You can shape it any way you want. You can create whatever beliefs or values you decide to in the moment. But the decisions you've made out of those references as to what shapes to pull out are going to determine what you sew together to shape the quality of life you have today and ultimately your destiny. Probably one of the most valuable things that references do for us is they help us to have a feeling of certainty when we go about doing something. Otherwise, we live our whole life afraid or in doubt. What would allow you right now to get up and step down on the floor and not be worried about whether the floor would support you or not? References. You got plenty of them. What would disturb you if suddenly the book in front of you began to float across the room? The only thing that would disturb you is it doesn't match your references. Why will a baby reach into a dirty ashtray, pull out a cigarette butt, and chew on it? Why? Because they don't have references to know it's not good for them. The bottom line is our references are shaping our life. And the problem is most of us are not paying attention to how we're interpreting our references, much less focusing on how do we get the references we need in order to succeed and achieve our goals. Hey, don't certain goals require certain references? Don't you have to have certain experiences, certain understandings, certain strategies in order to succeed? Well, think about it. References are not limited to our own conscious experience of life. References come in many shapes and types and sizes. We have the references of our past, yes. We have the references of the experiences of our present, but we all have the ability to pull references from our future. You might say, well, what do you mean by that? I mean, references are not limited to your actual experience. Your imagination is a source of references. Anyone who's created anything had to create a sense of certainty within themselves that they could achieve, that they could go. How did Columbus get himself to be able to come here? And he had to develop some references, and there weren't any. So what did he do? He unleashed his imagination. Your imagination is 10 times more powerful than your willpower. Our imagination unleashed can give us a sense of feeling and certainty and vision that goes far beyond the limitations of our past. And we're not limited to references as far back as 1492. We can come into the modern day. Lee Iacocca created references for himself and for everyone around them to believe that Chrysler could make it, so that our Congress would be willing to put money in to support that organization in turning itself around. You know, recently I received a book from Mr. Morita, the person who wrote the book Made in Japan. He's basically the co-founder of Sony, an unbelievably brilliant man. And he said one of the toughest and most important decisions he made in his life was when Bulova Company came to him and offered to buy 100,000 transistor radios when his company was just getting going, and they had the breakthrough radio. Well, at the time, they weren't even doing 10,000 units a month. The amount of money involved was worth tenfold what his company was worth at the time. It was an unbelievable deal, and yet he walked away from it. Why? You say he's crazy. The company's barely surviving. He can't do that. But what they wanted to do was put Boliva's name on those radios. And Mr. Morita said, there is no way I'm going to do this. And they said, look, you can still make your own radios too and put your name on them. We've been around for 50 years. You can benefit by putting this out. You can get the capital to expand your business. He said, yes, sir, that's true. But I'm going to turn you down and say no. He said, because 50 years from now, my company's name will be as big as yours. And I know this radio is going to help us to develop that name. Now, everyone around him told me he was crazy, even his partners. They said, this is insane. How was he able to create the certainty to make that tough a decision, which, by the way, again, he said is probably the most important decision he's made in his career? He did it by using his imagination. He focused in his mind on what he wanted things to be like, and he believed with absolute faith and certainty his vision. You see, the memories of your past are just pictures in your head. They're sounds, they're sensations that you generate. You feel them when you focus on them. Can you not also focus on how you want things to be and focus on it so continuously till it feels just as real to you and gives you the kind of certainty to take the actions that are necessary to succeed? Because you haven't done something doesn't mean you can't. Because you've tried something again and again and again and failed doesn't mean the next time you won't succeed. The past does not equal the future. Thomas Edison attempted to make the electric light bulb thousands of times. He could have taken all those experiences of things not working out and called them failures. Instead, he used every one of those as a reference for himself that he was getting closer to the solution. So again, references are invaluable, but in essence, it's what we choose to do with them that determines our life. Your past is a place you can learn from, but it's not a place you want to live. See, it's a place to spring forward from. And what doesn't work, throw it away. It's never too late to have a happy childhood. Whatever you're feeling is what you're focusing on, and you're in control of that process. So remember, while the fabric may be there are unlimited references, and they're not just your past. You're not limited to even your own personal experiences as references. You can borrow the references of other people. Most of my life early on, I didn't have the references that I could be a great success or that I could achieve on major scales or I could go out and turn things and people around. I did it with my imagination. I did it by reading stories of people that were succeeding and saying, hey, they've done this, and seeing where they really started and that hard work was really a part of it and that they kept their vision, they persisted, and they didn't give up. Those references made it real for me. So you can borrow from Emerson. When you read great poetry or when you read a great book, the power of it is as you read the book, you start thinking like the author. You start to feel like they feel, think like they think. You begin to imagine the way they imagine. You begin to develop those references as well. That's the power of culture. That's the power of literature, of a good play, of music. That's why we want to constantly be expanding our references, exposing ourselves to things that maybe we don't think we're going to like, and all of a sudden you find out you love them. I'll never forget one time I used to think, I don't want to go to a play. And one day I went and saw a play years ago called Les Miserables. Wow. One of the most powerful references of my life. I got to tell you, I have never seen or read or heard anything that moved me as deeply as that play did. I mean, I love the power and the majesty that human beings can translate through so many different areas, through story, through music, through drama. See, we want to expose ourselves to all of those things. We don't want to prejudge. You know, I've done a lot of things that were lousy too. But my attitude is if I can get one idea from it, if I can get one feeling, one experience, one exposure, it expands me. Limited references create a limited life. You want to expand your life? Expand your references consciously by pursuing other ideas and experiences that you haven't currently been exposed to. Experience is an invaluable tool, and you can pull so much from others as well. And we all are going to have times in our life where something's going to happen we have no references for how to deal with. And instead of just sitting there and giving up or saying, you don't know how bad it is, and telling them how terrible your life is, what eventually you must do is stand up and create those references or seek them out. See, no matter how bad you think things are in your life, somebody else has got it worse. No matter how well it's going, somebody else is doing better. Use contrast to move yourself forward. See, the only danger that destroys the quality of our lives are destructive beliefs. So when you start believing the way you're supposed to be is immobilized by pain or by problems, or that because you've got so many challenges no one else can understand, or because you've had a loss of a friend or a business or a goal or a dream for the moment or forever, that your life is over. When we start adopting those kinds of beliefs, our life ends. Instead, we must seek out references. And again, somebody out there can help you to feel better, if not by showing you that they're feeling worse. I mean, all you got to do is look around. You know, for example, I talked to somebody recently who works within our fortune management team, and the guy's really stressed out because he's making $150,000 a year as a doctor. Now, when he started with us 3 years ago, he was making $13,000 a year, and he was stressed out. The difference is now his stress is things like, gosh, they want to go to Paris this year, and he's not sure if he can do that on top of a couple other things that he wants to do. He doesn't have quite enough time to be able to run his practice, give the quality he's committed to his patients, and be able to take off as much time as he'd like to. That's his stress. And he's getting as stressed out now about that as he used to when he was trying to figure out how he could survive, how and if he was going to be able to send his kids to college, and when he was ever going to be able to have any time off. He was working 6 to 7 days a week. Now he works 4 to 5. I mean, we lose perspective. And if I ever start to lose perspective because I think I'm working so hard, and I do it just like you. We all do. The way I try and balance myself out is a little contrast. And the thing I do with my family, if we ever get out of balance, as I remind them of an experience we all shared. There was a gentleman who attended one of our seminars not many years ago who was just a really warm, gentle soul. He wasn't an outstanding personality that dominated or achieved or pushed, but you were touched by his gentleness. He was a wonderful man. And one day I got a note from one of our graduates who picked up a newspaper article outside of Toronto, Canada. And there was an article that I read that definitely affected our lives. And the gentleman's name was Joe Fritch. And Joe, I guess one day decided to pull into a gas station, and he didn't know what was about to take place. 2 men who'd escaped from prison had been out for a while and decided that they didn't like the outside world. Their idea, their references they were comfortable with was prison life. They thought they wanted to be free, but when they got out there, they didn't like the way it felt. They didn't like being on the run. So their idea of how to get back was to murder someone, to kill the very next person who came into the gas station. Didn't matter if it was a man, woman, or child. Joe was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe the right place at the right time, depending upon what you believe spiritually. Bottom line, they murdered him right there. He left 5 children and his wife. Can you imagine? You think you have problems? You have no problems. That family had some problems. You know what's unbelievable? The amount of love and support and caring. You know, I called his widow and I spoke to her on the phone. I'd never met her before and tried to offer any way I could support. And she talked to me about how deep the pain was. But I also realized the most important thing in this event was the meaning that she and the children were going to pull from this. Because this was a reference that would shape their destinies. But how it shaped their destinies was not the event, but what were they going to pull from it? What was it going to mean? They had the power to decide. And I asked her that. I said, what is this going to mean to you? She said, I guess it could mean that people are horrible and destructive and you can do everything right and life can still take advantage of you. And I held my breath thinking, how can I help her to see another meaning? And she said, but you know, I realize that if I teach my kids that and if I believe that, then there's no reason to live. And she said, I just can't believe that. She said, you know, we've received too much love and too much support. You cannot believe the hundreds of letters that we've received and people in the community coming to support us. And she said, well, it's so painful right now. She says, I know it must have happened for a reason. She said, I don't have a way to back it up. It's just my faith. She had to borrow from the future. She had to borrow. Her faith is the ultimate reference. She knew if she didn't do this, it would destroy her own life as well as her children's forever. And she knew she had to stand up and dig deep inside and find a meaning where no meaning seemed to exist. What a powerful woman. How lucky those children are. I asked her, I said, what do you talk to the children about? She said, I want you to notice, kids, notice all these people and how much love they're giving, that people are really good. That there are a few people in the world that are really bad, they're messed up, they're screwed up, and they need to be helped. But that your dad always believed in God, and he's gone to a better place. And he had things to do while he was here, and his time was up. But our time is not up. We've got to take advantage while we're here. What this should remind us is that every day we've got to live to our fullest together. And we can't look at losing him because he'll always be with us. Wow. How fortunate these kids are. Maybe a lesson we could all remember. And if you start feeling like, well, gosh, you know, I'm not making as much money as I think I should, maybe a little perspective would help by having the references of other people. By the way, I'm not making you feel bad if you're feeling bad about things. I'm just saying if you decide you're tired of feeling bad, easy way to feel good is go get some other references. And if you have no way to back something up, faith is still the ultimate reference. Always return to that. You've got to be willing to trust. So look through other people's references and realize that your references are not real. They're only what you've focused on. In any situation, although the references of your life, like being abused or being loved or having somebody leave at an early age or come into your life at an early age, you know, all those things are real, and yet what you pulled from them is what's going to shape your life. And it all depends on what you focus on. What's real is what you focus on. That's all that's real in your life. So you better make sure that you don't blame your references for where you are, but you take advantage of the references you have. And if you don't have strong enough references, create them or go get them. We all have that capacity. And I'm here to tell you that every great leader, every person that's succeeded ever in their life has found themselves in places where they didn't know what to do, and they made the references up or they went and got them. It's up to you to take control. I'm also here to tell you that if you don't take control of this process, you're going to pay a big price. See, it's easy in life to get caught up in Niagara. We've talked about it so many times, right? You jump on the river of life and you have an idea where you're going and you think you know where you're going, but hey, some things along the way knock you off course. And before you know it, sometimes we get caught up in the current of life, current demands, current fears, current challenges. And pretty soon we get to the forks in the river and we don't know where we're going. We let the river decide for us. We let the river of our despair, the river of our challenge, the river of demands of people around us, and we don't make conscious choices. We start acting like everybody else. And if you do everything like everybody else, if you respond to despair and to challenge and disappointment and frustration like everybody else, then you're going to end up like everybody else. Most people are not happy. Most people are not in control of their life. 1 out of 2 are in divorces. Right? Less than 10% like their body and say they're at their ideal weight. You know, we're in a society where people are popping drugs and alcohol and food all to try to change the way they feel because they haven't learned to master it. Most people are so caught up in the river, this thing called life, that one day they wake up having been swept by the river and realize they're 5 feet from Niagara Falls in a boat with no oars, and they say, oh shoot, but it's too late. Now is the time to take control of your life upstream. Now is the time to say, I want to experience all of life, and the painful experiences of life that are there, I'm going to pull some value from. Now is the time to decide that the focus of your life is going to be on utilization. That whatever life gives you, you'll find a way to use it to your advantage, to the advantage of others. That's the only way in life to feel rewarded and fulfilled. It's the only way to guarantee that this life has joy continuously. By the way, does this mean that you're never going to get down? You're never going to get frustrated? You're never going to feel despair? Of course not. You're going to feel those things, and you have the right to. But when you do, realize that they're a message, and the message is that you've got to change what you're focusing on, the way you're interpreting this thing, your perception about this, or you got to take some action right now to utilize what's happened. I also want to remind you that if you take the events of today and put a meaning on them immediately, you may be prejudging whether this is a good day or a bad day in your life. See, I'm here to tell you that some of the worst days in your life, you thought, are some of the best. Think about it for a second. Think of one of the worst experiences that's ever happened in your life. One of the very worst. As you think back to that experience, be honest with yourself. Isn't it true if you look back on it now that the truth is in some way it's positively shaped your life? Maybe it's made you more sensitive and more caring about other people because you were abused as a child, or maybe it's made you make sure that you treated your children totally different and it shaped their destiny for the good. Maybe because when you didn't have freedom when you were a kid, it drove you to create more freedom for other people. Maybe because you didn't have respect, you're more respectful. Maybe because you didn't have love, you're more loving. Maybe because something happened that was horrible, it just changed the entire direction of your life. Now you might say, yeah, that's true. Then maybe your bad days aren't so bad after all as you look back on them. And you might say, no, Tony, I've had some things that there's no way I can ever get over these. I'll always have pain for these. You're right, as long as you hold that they mean something like you've been taken advantage of or you have a loss that can never be returned. Just remember, loss is imaginary. Everything you think you've lost is an imagination because everything in the universe only changes form. Nothing ever disappears. What you got to remember is if there's something you're still not gotten over, it's because of the meaning you've linked to it. And maybe what you need to do is get some faith in there and say, even though I don't know why this has happened, I'm willing to trust. I'm willing to trust that someday I will. I'm willing to trust my Creator. That's a big leap. It's called a leap of faith. But it's the one that every one of us has to meet at some time in our life if we're going to move to the next level. And I got to tell you, every day you and I got to use faith. We got to use faith to be able to survive and to succeed. I remember reading a story recently about Billy Joel, where it was talked about how years ago when he was 21, 22 years old, how he was ready to commit suicide. Unfortunately, he got himself into a hospital. You want to know why he was going to commit suicide? Because he'd been in these bars where he'd been playing his piano, you know, his Piano Man songs, where people sit there and they don't listen and they're drunk and they spit all over you, they don't appreciate you. He'd been doing that since I think he was 16, 17 years old. Here he was, 22. My gosh, think of that, 6 straight years of heck like that. You know, not being able to really feel any fulfillment, no direction, nobody liked his music, and the only thing in his life that gave him any brightness was he felt he found the girl of his dreams, and then she left him. He's ready to commit suicide. Why? Because he knew he'd never amount to anything, and he'd never find a woman as beautiful as her. What kicked him out? New references. When he checked into that mental institution, he found out what real pain was. He got in that environment where he couldn't even turn his back on people. And he thought to himself, I have no problems, and I will never let myself get that down again. He said it's ridiculous, and he never has. The rest is history. Just remember, God's delays are not God's denials. What appears to not be working out right now, what seems to be a horrible event may in fact be a reward. It may be a blessing. Returning back to Made in Japan with Mr. Sony, Mr. Morita, it talked about in the very beginning of his company, before it was even known as Sony, that right after the war, they wanted to make these wire recorders. And they couldn't get anyone to make the wire for the recorders they were developing because no one was willing to bet on such a small, tiny little company that wouldn't succeed. And they tried everything they knew, and it looked like they couldn't build the recorder. Thank goodness. But because of that, they eventually found tape recorders and became one of the biggest makers of them in the world. See, what seemed like a horrible event turned out to be a benefit. Just remember, the next time you're feeling bad, you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. The only thing is, you're not going to know which ones they really are until much later in your life. So at this point, you might say to me then, Tony, how do I know what's really true? How do I know what I really should believe? Well, think about it this way. Beliefs are designed to empower you to take effective action so that you can grow and expand and make a difference for yourself and the people you care about. What should you do? You should look for beliefs that will empower you. It's not whether a belief is accurate or not, because you can back up a feeling of accuracy on almost any belief. Hey, in any argument, you can always get somebody to back up your view. You can always find a way. If you talk to somebody who says, yeah, well, I have the statistics, say, yeah, and I've read the book called How to Lie with Statistics. Most attorneys have it. There really is such a book, and it'll show you how to manipulate any kind of statistic. So I'm here to tell you that we need to find the statistics and the experiences in life that cause us to constantly grow and expand, that cause us to move to the next level, that cause us to utilize life's challenges and turn them into life's opportunities. That's what you and I have to do continuously. Remember, people can rationalize anything. Remember what we talked about earlier. You've got references to back up the idea that people are terrible and mean and they'll take advantage of you, and you get yourself to feel certain and prove that's true, and you've got the references to back up the idea that people really care. If you give them half a chance, they'll support you. So what you're going to believe is what is empowering, and that's the key question you might want to learn to ask yourself. If you feel like you're overwhelmed or overloaded or you can't get through it, or you don't know how to turn things around, or you're really mad at somebody, or you're stuck in a lousy pattern, a good question to ask yourself is, what would I have to believe in order to feel this way? See, if you ask that question, your brain may say things like, well, I'd have to believe that I'm totally out of control and that I don't direct my own life. And there's probably a belief inside of you that's contrary to that. One that says, that's garbage. And the minute you hear that, the minute you notice it, the awareness alone can be curative. Just seeing that, you can say, oh, this is garbage. No way. I don't believe that. And you can move on. It can break your pattern. See, oftentimes we organize our references in a way that limit us. Remember what I said earlier. Limited references create a limited life. There's a term in sociology that we should all become more familiar with, and it's called ethnocentricity. What does it mean? It means we all run around thinking our references are the only references for the world. I mean, for example, what do you think would happen if one day I said, hey, let's go to lunch, and we walked into a particular third world country, and I won't say which one just to not aggravate certain people of that nationality, but I'll tell you there are many countries in the world where this is true, one specifically I'm thinking of. Well, we could go in, there's cages in the room, and there are dogs in those cages. And we go up to the counter and I'll say, we'll take that one. And sure enough, they take out the dog, they cut its throat right there, and they begin to skin it and cook it. You say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. These people are killing this poor dog. And look at these people around. You begin to realize that all the people sitting there, it's in a little mini type of restaurant, and they're all eating dog. He says, this is crazy. Is it? I would tend to agree with you. But how do you think an Indian feels when they come and see you eating cow right in front of them? An Indian who has a belief that that is a holy creature that you're putting inside your body. I guess it all depends on references, what you believe, huh? Maybe the next time you get really upset with somebody, maybe one of the ways you can at least have some compassion and understanding is to see that, they probably have different references than you do. Now, that's not an excuse, but at least can allow us to have a better understanding of each other, of people, because it is true. You could have the same references and have interpreted them differently. And you could have come out totally differently based on the same situation, but compassion is going to get us a lot further. If you don't understand, and if I'd interpreted in the same way they had, I'd be feeling the same way. So I'm not going to make them wrong. All I want to do is try and give them some new references so they might have a new perspective, because that's how we develop new beliefs, by new references. Now, you can realize that certain references, in spite of being given, can be ignored to maintain an old belief. But I'm also here to tell you, if someone gets enough new experiences, enough new references, oftentimes you can trigger and create a total change. And that's one of the reasons I do the firewalk. I can talk to you all day long about the power of your brain, and you can go, yeah, I know I'm tapping less than 10% of my brain. Most people brag about that. But if I get you in a firewalk and I get you to get across this fire, 12 feet of burning hot coals, 1,500, 2,000 degrees, what happens is it's not like mind over matter. It's nothing special. But I'll tell you one thing, on the other side of that fire, it gives you an experience you won't forget. It's a new reference. And your brain says, if I can get myself to do this, what else could I get myself to do that I once thought was also impossible? Maybe fear is just false evidence that appears real, F-E-A-R. Maybe what we need to do is get new references, and the things we fear will be things we'll be able to utilize and move on. So if you want to shape your life, seek out references, more of them. Expand your life by expanding your references. Bottom line is, life is lived by being willing to constantly expand what we know and what we feel and what we do. Make sure you do it consciously. Make sure you interpret your life in a way that empowers you.